Bleach. Studying medicine can't save the spirit world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 601. Carefully arranging flowers. After all, Senju Cheng knew very well how sharp Unohana teacher's observation was. Even the slightest unreasonableness could be magnified into countless details in Unohana Retsu's eyes. Therefore, even though Senju Cheng was already panicking inside, he did not show any change on the surface, and he did not dare to reach out to push Kuronko Yorishi away. Boom boom boom. In the intense heartbeat that only Senju Cheng could hear, Senju Cheng endured the intense and strange feeling while suppressing his panic and answered without raising his head. It's just a small mistake. It seems that I haven't been careful in flower arrangement for too long, but I should be able to make up for it. After a pause, Senju Cheng slightly raised his eyes and noticed some spare flowers placed behind Unohana Retsu. His tone and expression were very natural. Unohana teacher, can you please pass me those spare flowers? Unohana Retsu, who had just stood up, heard this and did not think much. He turned his back to Senju Cheng and took the flowers. At the moment when Unohana Retsu turned around, Senju Cheng quickly grabbed Kuronko Yorishi with both hands and picked Kuronko Yorishi up from his arms. Meow. Kuronko Yorishi, with his pink tongue sticking out, didn't realize what he had done. Instead, he yelled at Senju Cheng, as if expressing some kind of dissatisfaction. Senju Cheng couldn't help but pat Kuronko Yorishi's head. Then, Senju Cheng, who was always paying attention to Unohana Retsu from the corner of his eye, saw that Unohana Retsu had already picked up the flowers, and there was no time to continue to teach Kuronko Yorishi a lesson for his stupid behavior. Then, Senju Cheng threw Kuronko Yorishi out of the window without hesitation. Unohana Retsu turned around and found that the black ball was missing from Senju Cheng's arms, and asked, "Where's Yorishi?" "I don't know, maybe she felt bored, so she went out to relax." Senju Cheng took care of the flower arrangement in front of him as if nothing had happened, and answered indifferently. As for Senju Cheng's reaction, Unohana Retsu's gentle eyes unconsciously flashed with satisfaction, and then he leaned over and placed all the spare flowers in front of Senju Cheng. Suddenly, Unohana Retsu's eyes were slightly fixed, and he noticed a rather inconspicuous water stain in Senju Cheng's arms. Then, Unohana Retsu raised his eyes to Senju Cheng, and his eyes met with Senju Cheng's. Facing Unohana Retsu's gaze, Senju Cheng subconsciously felt a little guilty, and his pupils wandered for a moment, and then he maintained his normal state and kept looking at Unohana Retsu. However, even if his eyes wandered for a moment, Unohana Retsu caught it very clearly. However, Unohana Retsu did not open his mouth to question, but sat next to Senju Cheng, then took out a small handkerchief from his hand and stretched it towards Senju Cheng, gently wiping the water stain, and said in a doting tone, "Cheng, you've grown up, but you still get yourself wet carelessly." Hearing these words that seemed to be suggestive but not specific, Senju Cheng's heart tightened, and he said with a smile, "If Unohana teacher hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known that Yorishi drooled when she slept. So, Cheng likes Yorishi, and it's understandable that he usually holds her like a pet, but he has to be careful not to let Yorishi do anything too much." After a pause, Unohana Retsu continued as if chatting. "Although wild cats are not foxes, they may have a little smell on their bodies. If they get stained with the smell, the teacher will have to help you wipe it off." Senju Cheng heard this and smiled awkwardly, listening to Unohana Retsu's teachings like a filial disciple. Unohana Retsu, who originally wanted to continue to take advantage of the situation to remind Senju Cheng, looked at Senju Cheng's gentle and filial appearance, and his inner wickedness seemed to be illuminated by a few rays of sunshine. In his eyes, he looked at Senju Cheng, with only pampering and a few unconscious affections. "Okay." Unohana Retsu looked at the watermarks that had been wiped off, put away the handkerchief, and then said, "It's just right. Without Yorishi's harassment, Cheng can arrange flowers well. If your level declines and the flower arrangement is not satisfactory to me, I will not forgive you. Who is disturbing my attention? Does Unohana teacher really not know?" "No, Unohana Retsu definitely knows, but I don't know if it's intentional or accidental," Senju Cheng secretly complained in his heart, but on the surface he confidently refuted. "I have been practicing for decades, just for the day when I can arrange flowers with Unohana Retsu. Then we'll wait and see." Retsu chuckled, then sat back in front of his flower arrangement and continued to complete his work. Makoto Senju took a few deep breaths, calming his nervous heart that was still beating violently, and refocused his attention on the flower arrangement in front of him. For Makoto Senju and Retsu, the art of flower arrangement is not only a way to cultivate sentiment, but also a unique way of emotional communication between them. Soon, Retsu and Makoto Senju completed their respective flower arrangements almost synchronously, and then entered the stage of mutual commentary and interpretation. Outside the house, the drizzle was still falling. Kuronko Yorishi, squatting under the eaves, looked at the gentle and brilliant smiles of Makoto Senju and Retsu in the house, and was so angry that his tail stood up. However, Kuronko Yorishi is very good at drinking, but flower arrangement? What the hell is that? At this moment, even if Kuronko Yorishi wanted to get involved, he had no way to do it at all. So far, Kuronko Yorishi had to admit a fact: although he had been with Senju Makoto for almost 10 years, Senju Makoto, as a disciple of Retsu, undoubtedly had a profound influence on Senju Makoto in terms of hobbies and interests. In other words, whether in terms of combat power, hobbies, relationship, etc. He had no advantage in front of Retsu. In this case, there was only one way to break the deadlock: find external help. Kuronko Yorishi's tail swung gently from side to side inadvertently, and his mind quickly locked on the most suitable ally for him, Seireitei. From Senju Makoto's words and deeds towards Seireitei, Kuronko Yorishi knew very well that Seireitei's status in Senju Makoto's mind was definitely not low. Only if I join forces with Seireitei can I divert the attention of Senju Makoto, who is completely attracted by Retsu. With this thought, Kuronko Yorishi paused his tail, looked at Retsu with dissatisfaction in his eyes, and disappeared instantly, heading towards Seireitei in Karakura town. You are just an old woman who is over 1,000 years old, you won't be so proud for long. Chapter 602. Fingerlion Optical Shop. At this moment, in the Karakura commercial street, Seireitei, wearing a denim outfit and brown sunglasses, is taking Omida Kichio on a shopping spree in the commercial street. Perhaps Seireitei's family is not rich, but as the son of Omida Kichio, the Licking King recognized by Senju Makoto, he has undoubtedly inherited the Omida family in some aspects. And the Omida family is a flourishing among the nobles of Seireitei, and an aristocratic class among the flourishing. Especially as a large number of nobles in the noble street were wiped out by Aizen Sasuke, the Omida family seized the opportunity and greatly expanded the business empire they owned, involving a lot of business and wealth in the present world. However, it is precisely because of this that the Omida family, who were not even qualified to keep such a huge wealth on their own, now respect Seireitei and the Shifen Yuan family to the extreme. It can be said that Omida Kichio will buy everything that Seireitei's eyes linger on without hesitation. But in a moment, Omida Kichio, who was originally like a small meat mountain, was covered with a layer of shopping bags and had difficulty following behind Seireitei. But in response to Omida Kichio's flattery, Seireitei's brows were inadvertently frowned, and a bit of disgust appeared on her face, saying, "Shame on you." Omida Kichio didn't care about this, but instead quickened her pace to keep up with Seireitei. As a member of the Omida clan, Omida Kichio knew a truth very well. The Omida family could not be loved by the captain of the 2nd Division for generations, but the Omida family could become a necessary existence for every captain of the 2nd Division. Omida Kichio also followed the family motto. Although she knew that her flattering behavior might not be able to win Seireitei's joy, she could become Seireitei's indispensable and important subordinate in this way. Seireitei walked aimlessly on the most famous commercial street in Karakura, but her eyes were confused from time to time. Compared to the Soul Society, the prosperous real world undoubtedly has many more novel and interesting things. However, when these novel and interesting things have no one to share them with, Seireitei feels lonely, and the image of Makoto Senju subconsciously emerges in her mind. Suddenly, Seireitei stopped in front of an eyeglass store. Staring at the eyeglass store, Seireitei's behavior made Omida Kichio a little confused. Seireitei usually doesn't wear glasses, and following Seireitei's gaze, it seems that Seireitei is looking at the entire eyeglass store. Then, Seireitei turned around and walked straight into the eyeglass store. For Seireitei, maybe Seireitei doesn't wear glasses, but glasses have a special meaning to Seireitei. After meeting Makoto Senju, the glasses that she casually recommended were often worn by Makoto Senju later. So, is it the first gift I ever gave to Makoto? A bitter and somewhat sweet smile appeared on the corner of Seireitei's mouth, and her eyes swept over the various glasses in the store, and finally fell on a pair of dark grey narrow-framed glasses. It seems to be the same as the glasses recommended to Makoto in my memory. Seireitei walked over unconsciously and picked up the glasses carefully. When the manager of this glasses store saw this and was about to open his mouth to praise Seireitei's workmanship, material, and style of this pair of glasses, Omi Takichio, who vaguely understood something, glared at the manager fiercely. In an instant, the manager was frightened by Omi Takichio's momentum, who looked like a big upstart, and dared not say a word. As Seireitei's vice-captain, perhaps Omi Takichio is not the one who knows Seireitei's thoughts best, but she is undoubtedly clear about Seireitei's untouchable thunder points. Makoto Senju, the vice-captain of the 4th Division, who had performed surgery on him that left a lifelong shadow on him, is undoubtedly a topic that must not be brought up in front of Seireitei. Moreover, Seireitei occasionally showed a weak look, which must be related to Makoto Senju. Seireitei must not be harassed at this stage. After a moment, Seireitei spoke while stroking the glasses in her hand. Kichio, how about we open an eyewear store during this time in Karakura town? Of course, no problem. Omi Takichio answered with a smile, and then spoke. It just so happens that I also like glasses very much and have a certain understanding of them. I can just help Captain Seireitei become a qualified clerk. Then, Omi Takichio put down the shopping bag that was like a small mountain in her hand, and then put her arm on the manager's shoulder, and pulled him to a corner without giving him a chance to resist. When Omi Takichio came back, she had an extra transfer contract in her hand, and then said to Seireitei, Captain Seireitei, do you want to change the name of the eyewear store? Seireitei pondered for a moment, and said with an unnatural look in her eyes, let's change it to Fingerlion Optical Shop. Omi Takichio seemed to have no idea what it meant, and answered directly. Okay, I'll arrange for someone to send a new store sign. Seireitei nodded and said calmly, thank you for your hard work. Suddenly, Omi Takichio's eyes lit up, and she seemed to be full of motivation. She decided to contact her family members immediately to arrange for 10 or 8 opticians to come over tonight to cram glasses knowledge from scratch. As Omi Takichio hurried out to arrange the change of the store name, Seireitei took the pair of dark grey narrow-framed glasses and placed them in front of her seriously, muttering, Makoto, if there is any world you want to see, let me take your place and see it slowly. Suddenly, there was a cat leg in Seireitei's eyes. Seireitei raised her eyes and saw that it was the black cat incarnated by Shifu Yuan Yorishi. This also made Seireitei's weak and gloomy expression on her face cold, and she spoke. Shifu Yorishi, what's up? The black cat Yorishi flicked its tail and spoke. Of course I have something to ask. I need your help with something. Please recognize your position, Shifu Yorishi. Seireitei put away her dark grey narrow-framed glasses and spoke coldly. I'm no longer your subordinate. On the contrary, I'm now the captain of the 2nd Division and the commander-in-chief of the secret mobile team. You are just a sinner who betrayed the Seireitei and the Shiwuin family. It must be said that most of Seireitei's impression of her is still that of the shy and cute Shiwuin Yorishi. Looking at Seireitei's small but domineering appearance, her eyes can't help but light up. Chapter 599 has been banned, and I'm applying for unbanning. I'm so sad. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 603 Swearing by the Ancestors. There is no doubt that Yorishi Shiwuin, who has been respected since childhood, has never lacked people who like her. Among them, the former vice-captain of the 2nd Division, Nozomi Omida, can be called the Licking King. Therefore, although Yorishi Shiwuin also liked Seireitei, who looked both arrogant and shy, in the past, it was Seireitei in front of her who was more likely to arouse Yorishi Shiwuin's interest. Pa. The next moment, Yorishi Kuronko's tail swung, and in a burst of air explosions, Seireitei, who was using the artificial body, did not react at the moment, and directly swept away the dark grey narrow-framed glasses that Seireitei was about to put in her arms. Then, Yorishi Kuronko disappeared directly from the spot. This sudden change made Seireitei startled, and then her originally expressionless face instantly turned red, and her anger could not stop rising. Yishi Shiwuin, you bastard! Seireitei roared, directly broke away from the artificial body to return to the spirit state, and quickly chased in the direction of Yorishi Kuronko. Although Kuronko Yorishi still maintains a certain degree of combat power under the Black Cat form, it is obvious that there is no comparison with the real body. Therefore, in just a moment, Seireitei caught up with Kuronko Yorishi from a distance, then she slowly drew out a zanpakutō, and looked at Kuronko Yorishi with murderous intent in her eyes. The next moment, Seireitei's figure flashed, and the dagger-like zanpakutō turned into a cold light and dangerously passed through the side of Kuronko Yorishi's body. Then, relying on her extremely small body, Kuronko Yorishi sank his body, quickly rolled up his glasses and drilled into a gap, thus briefly pulling away from Seireitei, and said teasingly, "So ruthless, Seireitei, did you really want to kill me just now? Give me back my things." Seireitei stared at Kuronko Yorishi and said with gritted teeth. In the past, Shibuya Yorishi had teased Kachika Byakuya countless times in a similar way. At the time, Seireitei only thought that Yorishi could treat her juniors in a group without any self-esteem. Now, a similar thing happened in Seireitei's identity. Seireitei really wanted to fight with Shibuya Yorishi, and even wanted to kill Shibuya Yorishi in anger. "Don't be impatient, Seireitei." Seeing this, Kuronko Yorishi's tail swung left and right unconsciously as if it was due to his bad taste. As for the past between Seireitei and Makoto Senju, Kuronko Yorishi naturally knew everything, and what the glasses on his tail meant to Seireitei, he knew it very well. Therefore, Kuronko Yorishi spoke in a reasonable tone. "These glasses are just a substitute after all, Seireitei, it's not a good thing to indulge in the past." "Shut up, you have abandoned all the past and you are not qualified to say such things to me," Seireitei retorted unceremoniously. In response, Kuronko Yorishi did not intend to correct her, but instead followed Seireitei's words. "It is precisely because I abandoned those meaningless pasts that I was able to discover a very interesting man, better than Senju Makoto, Kachika Byakuya, and Urahara Kisuke is incomparable to him." As soon as the shameless remark came out, Seireitei's earbs, who were actually quite thin-skinned, unconsciously turned red, and her chest, which had not risen much before, rose violently in anger, and she subconsciously shouted, "You are not allowed to compare those messy guys with Makoto-kun. There is no existence in this world that can be compared with Makoto-kun." As soon as these words came out, the playful look in Kuronko Yorishi's eyes almost overflowed, making Seireitei, who gradually reacted, want to burrow into the ground. Looking at such a cute Seireitei, Kuronko Yorishi's pink tongue unconsciously licked it. Sure enough, Seireitei is awesome. If I live with my master and Seireitei at the same time, it would really be a life I look forward to. But before that, the master's attention must be diverted from Unohana Retsu. Otherwise, with Unohana Retsu, a troublesome and sinister guy, there is no chance. Then, Kuronko Yorishi moved his tail, rolled up his dark grey narrow-framed glasses in front of him, and asked meaningfully, "Suzuki, are you interested in finding an owner for this pair of glasses?" And Seireitei shouted angrily as if insulted, "Shut up, don't compare me with a shameless guy like you." "I don't want to." Kuronko Yorishi smacked his lips and then spoke. "Then do me a favor and I will give you an important piece of information about Senju Makoto in return, how about it?" Seireitei's expression sank, and he quickly asked, "What? What do you know? What exactly is it?" "I can't tell you now. The extent of your help to me will change the importance of the corresponding information." Kuronko Yorishi's tail was shaking unconsciously with excitement, and he said meaningfully, "It's even possible to let you feel Senju Makoto's warmth again." Instantly, Seireitei's pupils shrank noticeably, and she questioned, "Are you kidding me?" "I'm not kidding, I'm serious, I can swear on this, my ancestors. If I deceive Seireitei, then all my ancestors, including my most respected ancestor Shibuya Chihiro, will suffer eternal damnation and torture in hell." As soon as these words came out, Seireitei, who knew all of Shibuya Yorishi's habits, undoubtedly realized that Shibuya Yorishi was serious. Although Shibuya Yorishi's many behaviors were quite unreliable and bad taste, he had never joked with his ancestors in the past. "What do you know?" Seireitei said in a deep voice. At this moment, Kuronko Yorishi naturally couldn't rashly reveal his identity without Senju Makoto's knowledge, as that would be no different from betraying Senju Makoto. Although Kuronko Yorishi was quite sure that Seireitei's close connection with the Shibuya family and her relationship with herself and Senju Makoto would definitely make Seireitei stand on Senju Makoto's side without hesitation between the Soul King Palace and Senju Makoto. Then, Kuronko Yorishi narrowed her cat eyes and said meaningfully, "You shouldn't ask me this question now, but you should see how much effort and sacrifice you are willing to make for Senju Makoto. For a while, Soiloi Feng's face changed repeatedly. Important news about Makoto-kun, and it might even make her feel the warmth from Makoto-kun. What does warmth mean? This hint of something made Soiloi Feng's heart beat hard. Although she knew that a certain possibility was illusory, Soiloi Feng still had an irresistible feeling. Chapter 604. Hand-in-hand instruction. As expected by Kuronko Yorishi's eyes, Soiloi Feng, who had gradually made up her mind, nodded slowly and spoke in a slightly hoarse and low voice. Shiguin Yorishi, if I find out that you are lying to me, I will definitely make you pay an unimaginable price. Kuronko Yorishi replied with a humane smile on her face. Don't worry, I've put all my ancestors on the line. Then, Soiloi Feng took a deep breath and said, Tell me, what do you need me to do for you? Intelligence. Assassination. Tracking. Help you ask Captain General Yamamoto to return to the Seireitei? Or give up the position of captain of the 2nd Division? Of course it won't be these boring things, Kuronko Yorishi said as he walked in front of Soiloi Feng with an elegant cat step, handed the glasses back to Soiloi Feng's hands, and then said, I just need you to help me destroy the relationship between Unohana Retsu and Kurosaki Makoto. Huh. Soiloi Feng made a confused and cute sound, and was stunned. That's right. Kuronko Yorishi said without any hesitation. Unohana Retsu's staying at Kurosaki Makoto's residence has seriously affected the good relationship between me and my master, so I need you to help me destroy the relationship between Unohana Retsu and Kurosaki Makoto. Soiloi Feng. Until now, Soiloi Feng still felt confused. That's it? That's it? It's not an excessive request to betray that 13th Gotti squad and destroy the Seireitei, but a fight for favor. What's even more outrageous is that this still involves the fight for favor between Captain Unohana and Kurosaki Makoto. Then, Soiloi Feng, who gradually reacted, had a face as black as the bottom of a pot and said, Shiguin Yorishi, you spent so much effort just to tease me like this. What does this have to do with Makoto-kun's information? Of course. Kuronko Yorishi said as a matter of course. Don't you know how close the relationship between Unohana Retsu and Senju Makoto is? I just can't tell you the details. After a pause, Kuronko Yorishi jumped onto Soiloi Feng's shoulder in a flash, leaned into Soiloi Feng's cute little ear, and spoke. But as long as you can help me completely capture Kurosaki Makoto's heart, then in return, I can let you feel Senju Makoto's warmth again, understand? Soiloi Feng's expression changed, and she confirmed again. Are you serious? Kuronko Yorishi said fearlessly. You can choose not to believe it. Soiloi Feng took a deep breath and asked. Then what should I do specifically? Then, Kuronko Yorishi thought about it, leaned into Soiloi Feng's ear and whispered her plan. Soiloi Feng's face also unconsciously became ruddy, and her eyes were both shy and struggling. And in the courtyard. In a short time, Nakamura and Snippers were busy at the flower exhibition hall. Kuronko Yorishi left the courtyard. Kotetsuin also took charge of the children's work early and took Neil out to play with Kusaka Yaharu. This also made it so that after the small flower arrangement exchange meeting ended, Senju Makoto and Unohana Retsu realized that they were the only two left in the huge courtyard. And because this courtyard was newly built, Senju Makoto had already secretly arranged many layers of ghost barriers and spirit barriers. Therefore, in the entire Karakura town, this was the only courtyard where Senju Makoto was quite sure that neither the Seireitei nor the Hutomundo could monitor it. A certain thought slowly grew in Senju Makoto's heart, and there was a different kind of heat in Senju Makoto's gentle eyes when he looked at Unohana Retsu. Seeing this, the sensitive Unohana Retsu inexplicably felt a little uncomfortable. More than 1,000 years ago, in the chaotic Rukongei, there were countless people who cast similar eyes at Unohana Retsu, which also made Unohana Retsu's blade have more heads rolling. However, under Senju Makoto's gaze, Unohana Retsu did not feel disgust and anger as he did more than 1,000 years ago. Instead, he felt a sense of shyness that he was not used to, and even his wrists tended to be inexplicably weak. However, on the surface, Unohana Retsu still tried to maintain the dignity of a teacher, and spoke in a reserved and elegant manner. Makoto, your flower arrangement skills are a little rusty compared to before, so you still need to practice more in the future. Yes, teacher, Senju Makoto paused, looking at Unohana Retsu's shy but reserved look. More importantly, compared to the state decades ago when both sides were constantly pulling and testing each other's feelings, now Senju Makoto and Unohana Retsu have already understood each other's feelings. This also made the majesty that Yuna Hanaretsu had accumulated as a teacher in the past gradually unable to suppress a certain impulse in Senju Makoto's heart. Even though it was still broad daylight outside, and in Ueori time, Nikon Otono, Kotetsuin and others might come back at any time, but Senju Makoto couldn't help but speak weakly. I wonder if the teacher can teach me how to arrange flowers again step by step. Hand in hand. Yuna Hanaretsu's delicate body trembled slightly. This sentence also made Senju Makoto and Yuna Hanaretsu faintly more ambiguous. After a full moment, Yuna Hanaretsu habitually maintained the posture and tone of a teacher and responded, "That's fine." However, Yuna Hanaretsu didn't realize that her current outfit was not the white captain's Aori and the death suit, and she didn't deliberately braid her hair to cover her facial features. She was wearing a sailor suit, with black hair hanging down like a waterfall behind her, and her delicate and beautiful facial features were not covered at all, showing her charm as a woman. This also made Senju Makoto feel excited. With his fingers trembling slightly, he took out some flowers and asked Yuna Hanaretsu for advice. Although in terms of the flower arrangement level of Yuna Hanaretsu and Senju Makoto, the so-called basic knowledge of flowers is almost like two doctors discussing elementary school mathematics. The minds of both parties are undoubtedly not on the flowers at all, but gradually on each other. When Kuronko Yorishi quietly returned to the courtyard, he happened to see the eyes between Yuna Hanaretsu and Senju Makoto that were almost about to be drawn. Meow! A shrill cat cry completely broke the ambiguous atmosphere, causing Senju Makoto and Yuna Hanaretsu to dodge their eyes unnaturally. Then, Yuna Hanaretsu slowly raised his eyes and looked at Kuronko Yorishi with a look of murderous intent. This damn wild cat, how could it come back just in time? Chapter 605. The so-called the strongest. Not only was Yuna Hanaretsu's eyes full of murderous intent, Kuronko Yorishi's eyes were also full of ill will and shame. An old woman who had not bloomed for more than 1,000 years, now that she had set her eyes on her prey, was so proactive. How long did it take for me to leave and contact Soyoi Fong? She usually behaved elegantly and reservedly, keeping a slight sense of distance from everyone, but now the look of wanting to welcome but not accepting was almost written directly on her face. The stray cat that went out to wander around actually came back so soon? Yuna Hanaretsu asked with a smile. There's no way, there seems to be a stealing mouse in the house, so I have to pay attention to it. Kuronko Yorishi said sarcastically. Yuna Hanaretsu's narrowed eyes slightly opened, as if reminding with concern. Yorishi, do you still have the ability to catch mice? Don't let the mouse tease you and make you look dirty. Want to try? In an instant, under the seemingly normal conversation, Senju Makoto seemed to see the sparks of excitement between Yuna Hanaretsu and Kuronko Yorishi. The next moment, Yuna Hanaretsu, who quietly held a flower between his fingers, suddenly swung his fingers towards Kuronko Yorishi. Swoosh! Even though Yuna Hanaretsu was now maintaining a prosthetic body, under the peak of his sword skills, the flower was like a blade that slashed towards Kuronko Yorishi's abdomen. Bang! Kuronko Yorishi narrowly avoided it by turning into an after-image, but the penetrating power of the flower instantly completely sank into the ground. Kuronko Yorishi's figure flashed and ran straight out of the courtyard. Yuna Hanaretsu also stood up, and before Senju Makoto tried to smooth things over, he spoke first. The pets at home are naughty, and they need a little training that does not harm their lives before they are willing to be obedient. Makoto should not mind if I take action to train them a little bit. Then, Yuna Hanaretsu quickly chased in the direction of Kuronko Yorishi in almost the same step. What made Yuna Hanaretsu angry was that Kuronko Yorishi seemed to deliberately destroy the time he and Makoto spent together, and even waited for a while on a roof outside the courtyard. It was not until he saw Yuna Hanaretsu following him that Kuronko Yorishi provocatively swung his tail and flexibly jumped back and forth on the roofs. Yuna Hanaretsu had a hint of playfulness on his lips and followed without hesitation. Yuna Hanaretsu was not surprised to be resisted by some cats and dogs when he first entered a new home. However, Yuna Hanaretsu would let them know who is the mistress. Moreover, Yuna Hanaretsu knew that before he could completely make Kuronko Yorishi obedient, he might have some problems in his life in this new home. More importantly, Kuronko Yorishi dared to interrupt the communication between him and Makoto today, and who knows, he might dare to become the captain of the 4th Division and the teacher of Senju Makoto tomorrow. At this point, Yuna Hanaretsu also knew that with Makoto's gentle personality, he probably didn't know how to refuse other people's kindness, so it was necessary for him to take care of those troublesome things for Makoto. At this time, Kotetsuin, who was taking Nido out to play, appeared in Unohana-retsu's sight from afar. Captain! Kotetsuin looked at the sailor suit walking quickly on the street, with a pair of dazzling slender legs glowing white in the sun, and was stunned for a moment. However, Unohana-retsu did not explain anything to Kotetsuin. He passed in front of Kotetsuin and said this, and then he directly left the artificial body. Help me take a look at the artificial body. Captain, is there an enemy? Captain Zaraki is here too, can help. However, before Kotetsuin could finish speaking, Unohana-retsu, who had returned to his spiritual form, disappeared in front of Kotetsuin in an instant with a flash. This made Kotetsuin look awkwardly at Kinpachi Zaraki, who was leaning against the wall behind him, with Yarai Kusaka sitting on his shoulder and a bad look on his face. Gurgle Kotetsuin swallowed nervously, fearing that Kinpachi Zaraki, who was completely ignored by Unohana-retsu, would be angry with him. After all, in the news that Kakushansua said, Kinpachi Zaraki undoubtedly regarded Unohana-retsu as an old enemy. However, Kinpachi Zaraki was not only killed instantly by Unohana-retsu not long ago, but now he was completely ignored by Unohana-retsu accidentally, which made Kotetsuin worry whether this level of stimulation would make Kinpachi Zaraki do something irrational. Kinpachi Zaraki also stood up slowly, staring at the direction where Unohana-retsu left with an extremely ferocious look, killed instantly. Anger, unwillingness, suspicion and other emotions surged in Kinpachi Zaraki's heart. Since waking up on the beach, Kinpachi Zaraki still found this fact unbelievable. Not only was he defeated so easily by Unohana-retsu, but more importantly, am I much weaker than I was 1,000 years ago? Zaraki Kinpachi looked down at his palm, his eyes revealing deep confusion. He had been constantly pursuing his opponent for the past 1,000 years, satisfying his desire and instinct to fight, but why did he become so weak? Seeing this, Kusaka Yaru, who was sitting on Zaraki Kinpachi's shoulder, stretched out his little hand and stroked Zaraki Kinpachi's rough cheek, and said, "Xiaojian, are you doubting yourself?" "Don't doubt yourself, Xiaojian," Kusaka Yaru spoke word by word in a cute tone. "In my mind, Xiaojian is absolutely the strongest. As long as Xiaojian is completely serious, no one will be Xiaojian's opponent. The strongest." Zaraki Kinpachi slowly uttered the two words, then continued to lean against the wall, raised his head and looked directly at the dazzling sun in the sky, and said in a low voice, "It's just that even my zanpakutō has never responded to me," Kusaka Yaru encouraged sweetly. "That's just because Kinpaku is too strong, so he instinctively doesn't want to listen to that voice. TSK. Kinpachi Zaraki made a disdainful sound in his throat, then turned and walked in the opposite direction of Unohana-retsu, saying, "You're right, even without the power of zanpakutō, I would still be the strongest. I just need some stronger opponents to resharpen my blade a little. Unohana-retsu, you wait, the result will not be like this next time." Seeing that Kinpachi Zaraki seemed to have completely cheered up, Kusaka Yaru couldn't help but reveal a sweet smile on his face, then turned his head and waved to Nell, who was being led by Kotetsuin, and said, "Little Nell, let's stop here for today. I'm going to find some enemies to fight with Kinpaku first." Chapter 606. Everything is for Ching-gen's mission. Nell, who was somewhat confused from the beginning to the end, opened her round eyes, revealed a clear stupidity, and waved goodbye to Kusaka Yaru, and then spoke. "Yaru and his father have a really good relationship, PFFT." As soon as this was said, Kotetsuin burst out on the spot, and asked with a frown on his face, "How can Nell tell Yaru and Captain Zaraki are father and daughter with a good relationship?" Nell blinked and answered as a matter of course, "Isn't it? It would be great if father was willing to let Nell sit on his shoulders every day." Suddenly, Kotetsuin didn't know how to explain to Nell, who seemed to understand nothing. On the contrary, Kotetsuin looked at the Unohana-retsu Yakai that he was holding with difficulty with his other hand, and felt a headache. And in the courtyard, with the departure of Unohana-retsu and Kuronko Yorishi, Senju Makotao could only sigh and start to pick up the scattered flowers and so on. As for inserting himself between Unohana-retsu and Kuronko Yorishi, Senju Makotao would not do it rashly. After all, if you really count, Unohana-retsu and Kuronko Yorishi knew each other long before Senju Makotao, and the way they get along with each other, the relationship they get along with, etc. are not something that Senju Makotao should mediate. And Senju Makotao also understands that even if he takes the initiative to mediate the conflict between them and makes them look peaceful for a short time, the conflict will never be eliminated. On the contrary, if Senju Cheng takes the initiative to show his inclination, it will easily cause greater dissatisfaction. Therefore, Senju Cheng's silence may be the best choice in a sense, allowing them to adjust to a mutually acceptable level within a certain controllable range. This method is similar to the memory of Senju Cheng that the king never asks about trivial matters in the harem. Suddenly, Senju Cheng paused while packing the flowers and took a breath of cold air. Hiss. Just as Senju Cheng narrowed his eyes slightly and prepared to seriously reflect on himself, he looked towards the direction of the courtyard gate. Seireitei, who was wearing a denim jacket and whose beautiful legs were highlighted by jeans, came into Senju's sight. Seireitei, who was wearing a prosthetic body, put her hands in her pockets and chewed gum. Her cold and inhuman appearance made Senju's eyes light up. This slightly neutral dress undoubtedly made Seireitei look abnormally and formed a contrasting beauty with the image of Seireitei in Senju's memory. Seireitei raised her hand and knocked on the open door, looking at Senju from a distance and asked, "Hey, Kurosaki, can I come in?" Welcome. Senju responded, put down the half-packed flowers in his hand, took the initiative to greet her, took Seireitei to the reception room, and brewed a pot of tea for her, and asked, "Captain Seireitei, why do you have time to come to me today? Did you encounter any problems?" Seireitei supported her chin with one hand, and the plan that Kuronko Yorishi told her was rolling in her mind. The speed of chewing gum kept increasing, and her eyes tried not to look at Senju Cheng in front of her, but scanned the pots of flower arrangement artworks placed in the reception room. "Seireitei, remember? What you have to do then, it doesn't matter, you are not communicating with Kurosaki Cheng with your own spirit body, and the one you are in contact with Kurosaki Cheng is just the artificial body made by the 12th Division. You are just the one who controls this artificial body, understand? You have to be attractive to yourself. Although your figure is not curvy, but Senju Kurosaki Cheng must have had thoughts about you. Don't feel ashamed or shy, this is just a task, just think of it as a task given to you by Senju Cheng. Isn't everything for Senju Cheng?" Gradually, under the somewhat surprised gaze of Senju Cheng, the face of the cunning Seireitei inexplicably became more ugly. Feeling the more inquiring and doubtful gaze of Senju Cheng, Seireitei came back to her senses and unconsciously continued to speed up the speed of chewing gum while gritting her teeth and said, "No, can't I come to see you if I'm fine?" Senju Cheng. This tone, why does it sound like he came to see if I'm dead? Oh. Senju Cheng, who was quite puzzled about Seireitei's purpose, responded and said nothing more. He just sat opposite Seireitei and began to taste tea slowly. As a tea lover, although Senju Cheng is also a person of great reputation in Karakura town, the quality of tea that he could get in the past can only be regarded as barely. It is completely incomparable with the top quality tea enjoyed in the Seireitei. And the tea that Senju Cheng brewed now is the top quality tea that Unohana Retsu brought from the Seireitei this time. Therefore, in the midst of tea, Senju Cheng closed his eyes slightly and felt the sweet fragrance overflowing in his mouth, seemingly completely ignoring the restless Seireitei in front of him. Seireitei, who came here with a lot of ideas and a mission, how could she have the mind to taste the tea carefully? However, Seireitei's mission this time was ultimately 2 words, seduction. This was completely beyond the scope of the business skills that Seireitei had mastered in the past, but it involved important information about Makoto-kun, and even Yorishi promised that if she completed it perfectly, she could feel Makoto-kun's warmth again. Seireitei's little fist unconsciously clenched quietly, constantly comforting herself. Yorishi, that bastard, was right, it was just contact with Kurosaki Cheng through the artificial body, in a sense. This is manipulating the puppet to perform a necessary task. This is all a mission to obtain important information about Makoto-kun. There is no need to bring any emotions. Just treat it like an ordinary mission performed in a secret maneuver. With this thought, Seireitei took a deep breath and made up her mind completely. However, when Seireitei looked at Senju Cheng, who was leisurely sipping tea with a look of enlightenment in her eyes, her mind suddenly got stuck. Wait, seduction, how to do it specifically? This point, Shifunuan Yorishi, who used to be Seireitei's direct superior, did not teach her, and Shifunuan Yorishi did not explain the specific process when she explained the plan. And Shifunuan Yorishi also thought that Seireitei had already hit something interesting with Senju Cheng, so she just said, "Let Seireitei treat Kurosaki Cheng like Senju Cheng and seduce him in the time she has bought." However, what Shifu Yuan Yorishi did not know is that the kind and gentle Senju Cheng had never really touched Seireitei. As for, she had not even had time to truly confess to Senju Cheng, let alone make more progress. Therefore, Seireitei was confused. Chapter 607. Aspirations and Understanding. Time passed by bit, but Seireitei felt herself getting hotter and hotter, not because of the heat in her body, but because she was anxious. After all, Kuronko Yorishi's plan required her to have substantial progress or changes in her relationship with Kurosaki Makoto during the time she had gained by leading Unohana away. At least, it would give Seireitei a reason to move into the courtyard and live there, so that she would have a chance to drive Unohana out of the courtyard. The mission is going to fail. As this thought emerged in Seireitei's mind, Seireitei became completely anxious. Hey, Kurosaki Makoto. Seireitei suddenly spoke, breaking the tranquility of the reception room. Senju Makoto raised his eyes and responded. Can I move in and live here? Seireitei tried to soften her cold face a little, revealing a requesting attitude. However, in the past, except for the soft and cute appearance in front of Shifu Yorishi and Senju Makoto, Seireitei would undoubtedly have a look of keeping strangers away when facing anyone. Therefore, when Seireitei said this, it was not like a request at all, but more like a notice. However, Senju Makoto, who knew how Seireitei behaved in front of outsiders, did not care, and turned to subconsciously concerned. You haven't found a place to live in Karakura town yet, have you? These words that revealed concern, pity and sympathy made the arrogant and self-esteemed Seireitei subconsciously refute. Are you kidding? I just opened a new glasses store in Karakura town. Glasses store? How did you think of opening a glasses store? Senju Makoto asked. It has nothing to do with you. Seireitei replied, don't mind, I'm just a little curious, and I don't have the idea of exploring your secrets. Senju Makoto answered gently. And Senju Makoto's gentle attitude, as if facing an old friend, also relaxed Seireitei's originally tense expression and nerves a lot. Moreover, Seireitei also realized that it would be almost impossible to achieve the set goal if she maintained her original attitude. After a moment, Seireitei slightly tensed her body, and then walked to Senju Makoto with a somewhat stiff step and sat down. Senju Makoto. This strange and abrupt action made Senju Makoto almost subconsciously want to move away from Seireitei. Noticing Senju Makoto's reaction, Seireitei frowned slightly and asked, Do you hate me? Senju Makoto heard this and couldn't help but subconsciously worry that his reaction would cause some psychological damage to Seireitei. After all, Seireitei has always been quite concerned about the holy world, and her lack of feminine charm. Originally, from the perspective of a doctor, Senju Makoto could completely make up for this defect to a certain extent through superb massage skills before Seireitei matured. However, as the relationship between the two sides became familiar, this matter naturally could not be mentioned again. Although Senju Makoto subconsciously wanted to move away a little, it was completely an instinctive reaction to Seireitei's unreasonable and abrupt behavior. Isn't it a trap or something like that? This absurd thought emerged in Senju Makoto's mind. While being alert, he still answered in order to avoid unnecessary accidental injuries. No, Captain Seireitei is very cute, the type that you can't forget at first sight. However, these words that were meant to comfort Seireitei undoubtedly sounded like a signal to Seireitei. Hentai. But it doesn't matter. The so-called artificial body is just an identical doll. The purpose of the secret mobile team is mission first, and everything is for the mission. In order to ease the embarrassment, Seireitei thought quickly and tried to find a suitable topic, and said, I did open a nightglass store called Fengli Nightglass Store. If you have a chance, you can come to my store and have a seat. Fengli Eyeglass Store. This name made Senju Makoto slightly stunned, and he blurted out. Why did you choose this name? Seireitei's eyes revealed a trace of sadness, and she asked back. Do you even need to ask this? You have no part of Makoto's memories, shouldn't you know it very well? This sentence also made Senju Makoto speechless. Indeed, throughout Seireitei's life, the only one who can make Seireitei and glasses intersect is myself, but... Beloved. Seireitei treats me not just as a simple dependent as she treats Yorishi, and regards me as a spiritual pillar, but has developed more feelings for me. Thinking of this, Senju Makoto couldn't help but frowned. However, Seireitei noticed Senju Makoto's reaction and suddenly thought of something. Her pupils shrank and she asked with a trembling voice. You don't know? Could it be that in Makoto's part of the memory related to me, Makoto treats me in a different way? Senju Makoto's brows furrowed more and more, and he realized that this might be a good opportunity to take the opportunity to make things clear with Seireitei. After all, he couldn't bear the name Kurosaki Makoto all his life, and he would definitely restore the name of Senju Makoto sooner or later, and before that, he rejected Seireitei in such a tactful way. In the case of his death, Seireitei might be more likely to accept it. After all, Senju Makoto's view on Seireitei, from the beginning, after realizing that Seireitei was here to monitor and test him, Senju Makoto contacted and befriended Seireitei based on his value. And after Yorishi Shirin defected to the Seireitei, he completely replaced Yorishi Shirin as Seireitei's psychological pillar. Of course, in the constant contact with Seireitei, Senju Makoto did not hate Seireitei, and even gradually got used to Seireitei's dependence and trust on him, and he also liked Seireitei's various cute aspects. However, just like Raisin Sasuke's attitude towards Hinamori Mamo, yearning is the feeling farthest from understanding. In the case that both parties cannot really understand each other, the so-called love is just a false thing like a mirage. But Seireitei, who is not stupid, has already guessed something, and asked with a somewhat collapsed expression. Kurosaki Makoto, do you know something? Senju Makoto opened his mouth, and his heart was also in a bit of entanglement. Obviously, he had never confessed to Seireitei. Why did Seireitei develop such unexpected feelings? In Senju Makoto's established plan, the relationship between Seireitei and himself should have been the same as Yorishi and Seireitei in the original trajectory, with simple and strong admiration and standing firmly on the same side. It was enough. But now, it has undoubtedly become quite complicated and troublesome. Chapter 608 Hair Removal Surgery. At the same time, Kuronko Yorishi and Unohana-retsu's figures chased each other in Karakura town. Unohana-retsu, who had recovered his spiritual body, was not in a hurry to catch up with Kuronko Yorishi. He just kept a distance from Kuronko Yorishi and deliberately drove Kuronko Yorishi towards the outskirts of Karakura town. For ordinary humans, if Unohana-retsu did not deliberately restrain his spiritual pressure, the aftermath of the spiritual pressure would undoubtedly be fatal. Therefore, Unohana-retsu was like a cat teasing a mouse, constantly putting pressure on Kuronko Yorishi and driving Kuronko Yorishi towards the outskirts of Karakura town. Kuronko Yorishi's performance seemed to realize the seriousness of provoking Unohana-retsu. Along the way, he kept trying to use the complex house terrain of Karakura town to get rid of Unohana-retsu behind him. However, the seemingly harmless Unohana-retsu's instant step is also at the top level of Seireitei. Compared to Aizen Sasuke, who is known as the Zanpakutō who has reached the limit of the god of death, Unohana-retsu is only slightly inferior and white-5'd. While maintaining the black cat form, Yorishi can't get rid of Unohana-retsu at all. For a while, the black cat Yorishi seemed to be driven, chased, and forced to keep going towards the deserted suburbs of Karakura town. Finally, swoosh! A cold light passed through the top of the black cat Yorishi's head, and a large tuft of hair slowly fell from the top of the black cat Yorishi's head. This also made the black cat Yorishi pause, and looked at the smiling Unohana-retsu holding the zanpakutō in front of him like a burst of hair. Yorishi, this is almost here, it's impolite to run again. The black cat Yorishi showed a human twitching expression, raised his claws and touched the top of his head, and his face darkened humanly. Bored. And Unohana-retsu said with a smile. Don't be in a hurry to feel sad about this little hair. The real punishment has not yet begun. I remember that you have a nudist fetish, right, Yorishi? In this special form, Yorishi can just satisfy your nudist hobby, right? As a doctor, I am happy to help Yorishi remove the hair on your body perfectly. When he said this, Unohana-retsu's gentle and warm expression suddenly changed, looking dark and terrifying. I promise, I won't leave a single hair for Yorishi. When these words came out, even Kuronko Yorishi couldn't help but tremble all over. What a dark and bad statement. Even Kuronko Yorishi knew how dark and scary Unohana-retsu was, but he never expected Unohana-retsu to have such an evil idea. You dare! Kuronko Yorishi shouted. However, Kuronko Yorishi responded with a flash of cold light. There is one thing, in fact, Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni's judgment was not wrong. Compared to the uncontrollable state when holding the sword 1,000 years ago, Unohana-retsu can actually keep his sanity even when drawing the sword. Of course, this state is not something he has mastered recently, but he has slowly become controllable in the constant exchange with Senju Cheng over the past 100 years. Because only Senju Cheng. Unohana was unwilling to take Senju Cheng's life, so he forces himself to learn to keep his sanity in battle after battle. And this time, Unohana did not go straight to Kuronko Yorishi's vitals, but instead, at this moment, Kuronko Yorishi only felt a chill flashing on his side, and then saw a large piece of cat hair flying up. Fear flashed in Kuronko Yorishi's eyes, and his body subconsciously retreated to the back, trying to keep enough a distance from Unohana. However, outside the handle and inside the blade, is the scope of Kendo. In the form of a black cat, Kuronko Yorishi couldn't even see the speed of Unohana's sword. He only felt that large patches of sword light surrounded him. At this moment, Kuronko Yorishi seemed to have turned into a dandelion hairball, and the cat's hair on his body seemed to have become dandelions. The sword light swept through like a gust of wind, and the cat hair began to automatically detach from Kuronko Yorishi's body. When Kuronko Yorishi landed again after jumping back, the ground he stepped on was already covered with cat hair, but Kuronko Yorishi's body was no longer covered with a single extra cat hair, making Kuronko Yorishi's expression almost visibly darker. Unohana slowly sheathed the sword, looked at Kuronko Yorishi's new look, and said with satisfaction and gentleness in his eyes, "Yorishi, look how good this is. This way, there won't be cat's hair everywhere in the courtyard, causing the courtyard to always have a cat smell." "Asshole," Kuronko Yorishi said with a twitch in the corner of his eye. "You definitely can't have done it on impulse. Have you been preparing for this for a while? Have you been discovered? You are worthy at being the former commander-in-chief of the secret mobile operation." Unohana raised his hand to cover his mouth and said with a smile, "Yes, as a professional doctor, I will naturally prepare in advance before operating on the patient." After a pause, Unohana's eyes opened a little more and said, "When I was on the beach, I kept observing the details of Yorishi's black cat form and secretly simulated it several times. Now it seems that the hair removal operation is still very successful. At least nothing else was cut off." However, Kuronko Yorishi faintly heard a sense of regret from it. This made Kuronko Yorishi grit his teeth even more. It turned out to be a bad and extremely black-bellied woman. However, under Unohana's slightly puzzled gaze, Kuronko Yorishi's originally angry face showed a smile and said, "Captain Unohana, have you actually considered one thing?" "What?" Unohana asked with interest. "The feelings between you and Cheng are wrong things that were born out of unfairness." After a pause, Kuronko Yorishi continued with a serious expression. "You were a teacher and Cheng is a student. The relationship between the two sides is unequal. How can equal feelings arise in an unequal relationship?" Unohana frowned subconsciously and retorted, "That was in the past. Cheng is no weaker than me now, and to me, he has always been equal." Kuronko Yorishi said with a humane and playful smile. "However, it was born out of inequality from the beginning, wasn't it? And I happen to know about another bond between Cheng that was born out of equality. When Cheng truly feels the feelings that come from equality, he may re-evaluate his relationship with Captain Unohana." Chapter 609. "I promise to be your spiritual support." Unohana heard this and almost blurted out to ask who the object of the bond between Senju Cheng and him was. Suddenly, Unohana realized something and his face changed. "Did you deliberately lead me away from the courtyard?" "What a pity." "Yes." Kuronko Yorishi stepped hard on the cat fur on the ground and said, "Although the price I paid for this was a bit high, but it succeeded, didn't it?" In an instant, Unohana looked at Kuronko Yorishi with a bit more unkindness and said, "No matter how high-sounding the words are, it can't affect your goal. It's nothing more than to buy yourself more opportunities, Shifen Yuan Yorishi. Isn't it the same for you, Unohana?" Kuronko Yorishi fought back unyieldingly. "Don't live in the past. He is no longer the vice-captain in the Seireitei. What he needs may not be you. Whether it's me or not, it will never be a mere wildcat." Unohana said sarcastically. "That's hard to say." Kuronko Yorishi gritted his teeth and counterattacked. "After all, some age advantages cannot be ignored. Since you were already an old senior from 1,000 years ago, why should you stare at Cheng with the younger generation?" This sentence undoubtedly hit the key point at Unohana. Age. Even though Unohana has hardly changed compared to 1,000 years ago due to his cultivation of stopping wars for 1,000 years, coupled with his own expertise in medical skills, However, age and seniority are undoubtedly objective facts. However, Unohana has cultivated himself for 1,000 years, so he will naturally not be provoked to lose his mind by Kuronko Yoichi's few words. Unohana, who knew that Kuronko Yoichi's real goal was just to delay time in this way, did not continue to answer, but looked at Kuronko Yoichi deeply. Kuronko Yoichi almost shuddered subconsciously. Then, Unohana ran straight back to the direction of the courtyard. Unohana, who has always been indifferent to everything except fighting, has always been in a bad mood, but at this moment, Unohana was actually a little afraid that he would not be able to grab it. Some things can never be compromised. Is this another level of fighting? Unohana, who was quickly on the road with instant steps, seemed to reveal a certain horror. And in the courtyard, Senju Cheng was also in deep thought. Seireitei undoubtedly has a very special status for Senju Cheng. In addition to Yokiriza, who is regarded as a sister, Seireitei can be regarded as Senju Cheng's first real female friend. But compared with Unohana, Seireitei's status and importance in Senju Cheng's heart are undoubtedly far less. Slowly, Senju Cheng has gradually made a decision in his heart. Seireitei is very cute, but what Seireitei is obsessed with is just a woven cage called false. Both sides have never really understood each other. Therefore, in his memory, it seems that he only remembers you. However, before Senju finished speaking, Seireitei, who realized something, suddenly reached out and covered Senju's mouth, with tears as big as beans falling from her eyes. Don't say it, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it. From the initial toughness to now, Seireitei's voice even rarely reveals a weak plea. Senju also wisely chose to shut up, knowing that Seireitei already understood what he meant, but he just couldn't accept it in his heart. In a sense, Seireitei is like a husband who has fought for decades to avenge his wife, and suddenly learned that his wife had cheated on him a long time ago. This kind of blow is probably a little unimaginable. And looking at Seireitei's appearance that seemed to be close to collapse, Senju couldn't help but feel a strong sense of guilt. After all, it was Senju who deliberately let himself replace Yorishi Shuin to become Seireitei's spiritual pillar, but he never expected that Seireitei's real intention was to covet his body. Didn't we agree that she would only be a spiritual support and would not enter into life and body? Senju sighed, looked at Seireitei in front of him, patted Seireitei's back gently with his palm, and comforted her. Don't be sad, in the memory of that vice captain, you were definitely one of the most important, otherwise he would not keep talking about all kinds of things related to you when his self-consciousness disappeared. This statement undoubtedly gave Seireitei great comfort. At least, compared with Shifen Yuan Yorishi who left Seireitei silently, Senju Cheng was still talking about Seireitei when he was dying, and the performance of both sides was very different. And Senju Cheng was also trying his best to find a way to defend himself. After all, sooner or later, he would need to return to the identity of Senju Cheng, and he didn't want to lose Seireitei's support and friendship because of this, or even the two sides would go to the opposite side, and he had to bear the pain of letting Seireitei stay in memory forever. Compared with Aizen Sasuke, Senju Cheng believed that he was much gentler and purer after all. Captain Seireitei, have you ever thought that perhaps in the eyes of the vice captain, you are also one of his spiritual pillars, supporting, inspiring, and helping each other to keep moving forward and becoming stronger, and to achieve the lofty ideals in your heart together? These words made Seireitei seem to fall into some kind of deep thought and recollection. After a moment, Seireitei raised her eyes, which were slightly red, and answered. I understand. Understand? Senju Cheng, who was afraid that some misunderstandings would arise again, and he might accidentally be stabbed by Seireitei's knife in the future, couldn't help asking. What did Captain Seireitei understand? Then, Seireitei stood up suddenly, her face returned to her usual coldness, and she looked down at Senju Cheng and said, You don't understand Cheng at all. Senju Cheng. Or maybe you just got a part of Cheng's remaining memory, but I have known Cheng for decades, and no one understands Cheng better than me. After a pause, Seireitei continued. Kurosaki Cheng, don't think that you know a part of Cheng's memory, so you think you understand Cheng very well, and don't try to preach to me in Cheng's tone, so as to achieve your own ulterior motives. Senju Cheng. Ulterior motives. In an instant, Senju Cheng felt the first feeling of being wronged and taking the blame. What's even more outrageous is that this pot was taken by himself. Seireitei is clearly the dead of the greatest, bullying Senju Cheng as a dead person who can't really speak, so there is every reason to suspect that the judgment made by Senju Cheng is wrong. P.S. I'm back to positive, low fever, so there are only 2 updates today. Doghead saves my life. Everyone should also pay a little attention to it in normal times. In the second round of Poison Circle, I hope you can all advance to the finals. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 610. You smell like him. At this moment, facing Seireitei's attitude of I know Cheng better than you, Senju Cheng didn't know how to respond. Even seeing that if Seireitei continued to talk, she might even regard herself as Senju Cheng's widow, Senju Cheng wisely decided not to continue discussing this issue and changed the subject. Then Captain Seireitei has already opened an eyewear store in Karakura town. Why is he planning to stay here with me? Seireitei, whose thoughts were disturbed by the questions related to Senju Cheng, suddenly realized her goal and her face suddenly became completely embarrassed. Originally, Seireitei's mission was to seduce Senju Cheng while Kuronko was fighting for it. However, Seireitei's inadvertent expression of deep affection for Senju Cheng just now, and suddenly changed to trying to seduce Senju Cheng, even the stupidest person would understand that there must be something strange about it. Just giving up, Seireitei would definitely never give up. With the benefits promised by Kuronko, how could Seireitei accept the result of mission failure? Immediately, Seireitei suppressed the shame that rose from her heart and spoke with difficulty. Because you're the last person to see Cheng, you may have the smell of Cheng, so I want to get closer to you. Senju Cheng. At this moment, even Senju Cheng, a pervert, no, a pure doctor, couldn't help but feel that this statement was quite perverted, and even completely outrageous. Immediately, Senju Cheng's face became serious and he said righteously, Captain Seireitei, don't you think this behavior is too much to regard me as a substitute for another person? However, seeing that a lot of unnecessary time had been wasted and on the verge of mission failure, Seireitei kept repeating in her mind, I was just manipulating the artificial body to contact the other party, it's all Cheng's task. Then, Seireitei took the initiative to get closer to Senju Cheng regardless of anything, and there was a hint of pleading in her cold commanding tone. Don't reject me, just let me get a little closer like this. Feeling that petite and soft body again, Senju Cheng's eyes widened. Although Senju Cheng was very familiar with Seireitei's body in the past, and in a sense, Seireitei could be said to have grown up under Senju Cheng's watch. However, in the past, Senju Cheng had never had any evil thoughts towards Seireitei, so he had never had any special feelings. But now, with Seireitei's affectionate confession in front of him, feeling the same feeling again, the impact on Senju Cheng is completely different. Suddenly, Senju Cheng realized that Seireitei has already grown into a graceful young lady, and just as Senju Cheng's palm instinctively and habitually hugged Seireitei's most irresistible slender waist. Seireitei's body shook slightly, and she resisted the instinct of counterattack and disgust. Memories related to Senju Cheng kept emerging in her mind, and she controlled her artificial body to endure this strange contact. With her eyes tightly closed, Seireitei was in a trance. Suddenly, she felt the hand touching her, and she felt a familiar and extremely gentle feeling. Then, it completely overlapped with the memory of Cheng. Unconsciously, Seireitei could not tell whether it was a more emotional memory or an illusion that was too real, and she whispered softly, Cheng. This sentence also made Senju Cheng's expression and movements freeze. He always felt that the situation in front of him seemed to be a little wrong. Wrong. Very wrong. At this moment, boom. The roof of the reception room suddenly disappeared, as if it was wiped out by something in an instant. As Senju Cheng suddenly raised his head, what came into view was Unohana holding his zanpakutō, and Unohana expression seemed to be gentle and warm as he looked at Senju Cheng and Seireitei, who seemed to be stuck together in the reception room. It would be even better if Unohana's blood-colored spiritual pressure, which was already unable to be restrained, could be controlled a little more. Sure enough, if I don't keep an eye on it, mice that want to steal food will break into the house. Just as Unohana whispered, he turned his eyes behind him and looked at Kuronko, who took a piece of black cloth and wrapped himself up along the way. Kuronko Yorishi looked at the seemingly confused Senju Makoto and Soiloi Fong, and there was undoubtedly surprise in his eyes. Soiloi Fong did it better than he imagined. Yuna Hanaretsu can fight back against him without any scruples, but Soiloi Fong, as the current captain who doesn't know the true identity of Senju Makoto, will inevitably make Yuna Hanaretsu have concerns about his behavior. At least both Kuronko Yorishi and Yuna Hanaretsu know that the overall situation is more important, and the contradictions of internal struggles will undoubtedly not involve the overall situation. Therefore, in Kuronko Yorishi's view, Soiloi Fong is undoubtedly the best spoiler. The existence of Soiloi Fong not only makes Yuna Hanaretsu need to be cautious about his own behavior, but also acts an opponent for Yuna Hanaretsu to share the pressure for Kuronko Yorishi. Senju Makoto, who was stunned for a moment before reacting, was like a scumbag who was caught cheating by his wife. He subconsciously distanced himself from Soiloi Fong because of his guilty conscience. However, before Senju Makoto tried to explain, Yuna Hanaretsu, who appeared in the reception room in a flash, spoke with a bit of apology. "Sorry, it seems that I disturbed Mr. Kurosaki Makoto." This sentence made Senju Makoto's expression stiffen, and he answered subconsciously, No. Then, Senju Makoto realized that this answer seemed to be completely useless, and continued to speak. "Nothing happened between me and Captain Soiloi Fong." Yuna Hanaretsu covered his mouth and laughed softly, teasing like a normal bystander. "Is Mr. Kurosaki Makoto shy? Did nothing happen, or did he not have time to have anything happen with Captain Soiloi Fong?" Senju Makoto never expected that there would be such a moment when he would be eaten by the melon. Soiloi Fong looked at the reactions of Yuna Hanaretsu and Kuronko Yorishi in front of her, which were almost the same as expected, and was not surprised, and spoke directly. "Since Mr. Kurosaki Makoto has no objection, then let's do it this way. I will move in tonight." Then, Soiloi Fong hurriedly walked out of the courtyard. In her head, which was still a little dazed, the familiar feeling just now kept appearing. As she watched Soiloi Fong leave, Yuna Hanaretsu looked at Senju Makoto, who seemed a little overwhelmed in front of him, and whispered, "I didn't expect Makoto's physique to still attract bees and butterflies as always." Senju Makoto replied with a wry smile. No, Mr. Yuna Hana, let me explain." Yuna Hanaretsu glanced at Senju Makoto and was about to say something, but Kuronko Yorishi jumped onto Senju Makoto's shoulder, looking like his plan had succeeded. Chapter 611 Really Naked. Chapter 611 Really Naked. Yuna Hanaretsu didn't get angry when he saw this, but a gentle smile appeared on his face, and then he turned and left the reception room. This scene undoubtedly gave Senju Makoto a headache. There is no doubt that Yuna Hanaretsu's reaction is obviously not something that can be solved by a pure explanation. Yoichi, too much. Looking at Yuna Hanaretsu's back as he turned and left, Senju Makoto, who gradually calmed down, didn't realize that it was Kuronko Yoichi who did all these things. Kuronko Yoichi said disapprovingly. Yuna Hanaretsu was too proud. The master is the one who wants to sit on the throne, but Yuna Hanaretsu still subconsciously firmly holds the dominant position and interferes with the master's various choices. Senju Makoto didn't delve into Kuronko Yoichi's seemingly impartial explanation, but just sighed helplessly and subconsciously raised his hand to hug Kuronko Yoichi's shoulders. "Feel." Senju Makoto. Senju Makoto turned his head and couldn't help but exclaimed, "Where's your hair? How come there's none left?" This sentence made Kuronko Yorishi, who had just looked so proud, collapse on the spot, and completely broke down. In this case, Kuronko Yorishi didn't even want to return to his original form. After all, the hair of the black cat form was not generated out of thin air, but was transformed synchronously based on the hair of the original form. Since the cat's hair in the black cat form was completely removed by Yuna Hanaretsu, Kuronko Yorishi would not have a single hair on his body even if he returned to his original form. Suddenly, Kuronko Yorishi, with a slumped face, raised his head and looked at Senju Makoto, who was close at hand, and asked, do you dislike me for not having hair?" This question, dislike. Senju Makoto's palm was unimpeded on Kuronko Yorishi's skin, feeling the delicate feeling that was completely different from the previous touch of the black cat, and the touch was faintly similar to the touch of Kuronko Yorishi's original skin. Really smooth. How could that be? Even without hair, Yorishi is still very cute. After a slight pause, Senju Makoto held Kuronko Yorishi in front of his eyes and gently comforted him. However, Kuronko Yorishi, who had always been indifferent to this action, inexplicably developed a strong sense of shame and shyness when he had no hair at all. It was as if he was being watched closely without any cover. The strong stimulation made Kuronko Yorishi's tail unconsciously clamped and then blocked his body, which made Kuronko Yorishi have an unprecedented urge to escape from Senju Cheng. Don't look, Kuronko Yorishi spoke with some difficulty, his voice trembling obviously. Seeing that Kuronko Yorishi seemed to be bothered by his hairless state, Senju Cheng had an idea and spoke. Yorishi, do you need me to help you restore your hair? What? Kuronko Yorishi was slightly stunned when he heard the words, and then said, this is not something that Kido can do. My form is transformed by a special artifact. It is a special state between spirit particles and artifact particles. If I want to recover, I can only grow back naturally over a long period of time. Don't underestimate me, Senju Cheng said, and the palm of his hand that was attached to Kuronko Yorishi's body was shining with a green light similar to that of Kido. What shocked Kuronko Yorishi was that under the cover of the green light, strands of cat's hair appeared out of thin air in front of Kuronko Yorishi. Then, Senju Cheng's palm slowly moved on Kuronko Yorishi's body, and the cat's hairs that passed by seemed to be restored to their original state as if time and space were reversed. When Kuronko Yorishi reacted, his own state had been completely restored to its original state. Is this the power of name? Kuronko Yorishi said unconsciously. This is not only beyond the scope of Kido, but also beyond the common sense that Kuronko Yorishi can understand. In essence, this is undoubtedly close to the level of reconstructing life. That's not right. Suddenly, Kuronko Yorishi realized something and asked. Even if you, the master, have mastered the name of the spirit particle, my current state is not just the spirit particle, but also a part of the instrument particle. How did you do it? Senju Cheng smiled and said nothing. Senju Cheng has been carrying out the fusion of the instrument particles, so that the amount of instrument particles that Senju Cheng can control has been increasing. Perhaps in the battle, this amount of instrument particles cannot play any role at present, but extracting a small part to help Kuronko Yorishi restore his cat hair can only be said to be easy. However, Senju Cheng did have some guesses about the specific role of the instrument particles based on the spirit Kinko, and has been conducting research and experiments in secret. But before it is really clear, Senju Cheng will naturally not say something unclear. Then, Senju Cheng stroked Kuronko Yorishi's hair that had recovered as before, feeling the familiar touch, and then tapped Kuronko Yorishi and said, don't do this kind of thing again in the future. The courtyard is not big, and it can't accommodate many people. Senju Cheng reminded with a hint of meaning. Of course, whether it can accommodate everyone is one thing. Senju Cheng is mainly afraid of Field or something, although at present, both Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi are still quite restrained, but Senju Cheng always feels as if he will be stacked sooner or later. Obviously, Senju Cheng has always been pure and upright, treating every woman sincerely and gently, and never taking the initiative to do those extraordinary and presumptuous things. Why is he evaluated by Unohana teacher as a physique that attracts bees and butterflies? This makes Senju Cheng, who inexplicably feels that he has become a scumbag, feel helpless and innocent. Kuronko Yorishi heard this, but rubbed his head against Senju Cheng's chest and said, it is because they know that the courtyard is not big and can accommodate a limited number of people, so some people can't wait to squeeze into the courtyard. After a pause, Kuronko Yorishi showed a humane and playful smile on his face and said, unless the master is determined to expand the courtyard, then there won't be so much crowding. In response, Senju Cheng rolled his eyes at Kuronko Yorishi and stopped answering Kuronko Yorishi's boring questions. Instead, he contacted a construction company to repair the reception room and arrange a room for Seireitei. The trouble is never whether the courtyard is big enough to live in, but the problem of arranging rooms for everyone. In the final analysis, human energy is limited. When everyone who lives in the courtyard consumes a certain amount of Senju Cheng's energy, the more people who live in, the more serious the problem of energy allocation will be. Especially to satisfy Unohana teacher, Senju Cheng knows very well that the consumption of energy will definitely not be small. Chapter 612. Money Ability Omida. Chapter 612. Money Power Omida. Soon, Seireitei followed Omida Kichio, who was carrying a lot of bags, and moved to the courtyard. Then, under the somewhat surprised eyes of Senju Cheng, as a flexible fat man, Omida Kichio quickly and professionally cleaned Seireitei's room. Even the most inconspicuous corners of the quilt were tucked in perfectly, as if he was afraid that Seireitei would feel uncomfortable living in the courtyard. The disciple is better than the master, better than the master. At this moment, Senju Cheng gradually felt that he might not be able to win over the new generation of the king of Seireitei. Even when Seireitei was in the underground space, Seireitei made a temporary bed for her to rest, but she didn't have such a high level of skill. And I don't know if it was intentional or accidental. Omida Kichio, who seemed to be very hard-working, was sweating profusely and walked out of the room panting. He first nodded and bowed to Seireitei, who was chewing gum with an indifferent look on her face, and reported. Then, Omida Kichio wiped the sweat off her face and asked Makoto Senju, who was standing by. Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, where is my room? Makoto Senju startled and answered. Sorry, Vice Captain Omida, the area of the courtyard is limited and there are no extra rooms. No more? This answer obviously did not satisfy Omida Kichio. In Omida Kichio's opinion, there are not many things in this world that can reject her, and as a vice captain who needs to consolidate his position at any time, how can Omida Kichio tolerate staying away from Seireitei for a long time? Immediately, Omida Kichio's face sank slightly, and he reached into his suit that was almost bursting. The next moment, under the gaze of Makoto Senju, Omida Kichio took out a large stack of banknotes and said with great wealth. Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, tell me the price. I'll buy this courtyard. I can pay several times or even dozens of times the price. Sorry, I don't have any plans to sell it for the time being. I'll let you know if I have such a plan later. Senju Makoto refused with a smile. Omida Kichio. The ability to make money is ineffective. Omida Kichio, who hit a soft nail, was a little confused. For a human who runs a store in the present world, there should be no reason to refuse a money transaction with a return of dozens of times. However, knowing that Kurosaki Makoto's combat power is enough to rival the captain, Omida Kichio's face undoubtedly did not show the slightest dissatisfaction, and could only turn to stride for it. Then can I rent a room? This courtyard is so big, there should be rooms. But the courtyard is really full. In addition to the clerks, there are already several temporary tenants living in the extra rooms in the courtyard. Senju Makoto said helplessly. Tenants? Hearing this, Omida Kichio's eyes lit up slightly and spoke. That's okay, I can communicate with those tenants privately. At this moment, Omida Kichio was very confident. Perhaps, money can't solve Kurosaki Makoto, but for other tenants, isn't it easy? Then, just when Omida Kichio was about to turn around and pat her chest to Seireitei, promising that she could handle it and be ready to serve Captain Seireitei at any time. Pop. Seireitei, who entered the room, suddenly closed the sliding door, and had no intention of talking to Omida Kichio at all. However, Omida Kichio was obviously used to this kind of treatment of being ignored, and she was not embarrassed at all. Instead, she asked Senju Makoto with a smile. Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, where are the tenants here? And in this moment of direct contact, Senju Makoto also had a general judgment of Omida Kichio. Thick-skinned, flattering, patient, etc. Omida Kichio is still better than her father, but in terms of observing words and expressions and judging the situation, Omida Kichio is undoubtedly still a lot more immature. With the idea of winning over the tenants, Seireitei chose to close the door without asking any questions. This was already the most intuitive hint, but Omida Kichio didn't understand it at all. However, based on his past friendship with Omida Kichio, Senju Makoto didn't directly remind Omida Kichio. If Omida Kichio had a little experience and understanding, she would definitely grow more. Okay, then I'll take Vice Captain Omida to visit the courtyard, but the communication with the tenants, without waiting for Senju Makoto to finish, Omida Kichio directly stuffed the stack of banknotes into Senju Makoto's arms, and then winked and said, I understand, Mr. Kurosaki Makoto can rest assured, I will convince those tenants to give me the room on my own initiative. Okay. Senju Makoto raised his eyebrows, quietly put away the stack of banknotes, and prepared to buy some necessary bedding for Seireitei. Then, Makoto Senju led Omida Kichio and just for 2 steps, a green shadow suddenly passed by and accurately bumped into Makoto Senju's arms. Father, I'm back. Did you have fun? Makoto Senju asked. Yeah, Kotetsu took me to many places. Nailu gestured happily, trying to describe and share today's happiness with Makoto Senju. While listening, Makoto Senju nodded slightly to Kotetsu, who followed Nailu in a hurry. Seeing this, Kotetsu hurriedly stopped and saluted Makoto Senju. Then, Makoto Senju gave Omida Kichiyo a look, and Omida Kichiyo immediately reacted and understood that Kotetsuin was undoubtedly one of the tenants living in this courtyard. Although Kotetsuin usually acted as a deputy captain of the 4th Division, his status was only a chief officer. Seeing this, Omida Kichiyo was about to step forward to talk to Kotetsuin to activate his money ability. Unohana Retsu's gentle and elegant figure just walked to the side of Senju Makoto and spoke to Kotetsuin. Come back. As for what Kotetsuin answered, Omida Kichiyo, who felt her head was buzzing, could no longer hear clearly. Captain Unohana Retsu, why is he here? After witnessing Unohana Retsu's true form of releasing Bankai on the beach, Unohana Retsu's image in the GOTY 13 has undoubtedly undergone a huge change. Under the gentle and elegant appearance, what is hidden is a past full of slaughter and fighting like a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. That is the first Kinpachi who is equivalent to the history of the GOTY 13, a terrifying existence at the same time as Captain General Yamamoto. So, Captain Unohana is also a tenant. However, before Omida Kichiyo instinctively wanted to sneak away, Unohana Retsu's voice suddenly reached Omida Kichiyo's ears. You're Omida Kichiyo, the vice captain of the 2nd Division, right? Chapter 613. Meaning, yes, Captain Unohana, vice captain of the 2nd Division, Omida Kichiyo, sends his greetings. Omida Kichiyo, whose body suddenly froze, turned around quickly, bowed in a standard and respectful manner, and shouted loudly. This loud voice made Senju Makoto wonder if Omida Kichiyo wanted to ask Seireitei for help in this way. And Unohana Retsu asked gently, "What's the matter with you in the courtyard?" However, before Omida Kichiyo could find a way to argue and perfunctorily get over it, Senju Makoto smiled and joined in. Vice Captain Omida also wants to move into the courtyard, but because of the limited rooms, Vice Captain Omida wants to find a tenant to transfer the room. Omida Kichiyo. In an instant, Omida Kichiyo's back was almost visibly wet. Is that so? I'm really sorry, Vice Captain Omida. Yun and I are currently staying in Mr. Kurosaki Makoto's courtyard. If I transfer the room, I'll be a little distressed. However, the gentle and warm voice of Unohana Retsu almost made Omida Kichiyo's knees tremble, and she spoke subconsciously. No, what I mean is how can I ask for Captain Unohana's room? I just made a joke with Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, but I didn't expect Mr. Kurosaki Makoto to take it seriously. Omida Kichiyo said anxiously. That's good, Unohana Retsu said gently. After all, if the vice captain of the 2nd team asked me to leave the courtyard, I would be very embarrassed. Who knows, other captains might think that I don't even have a place to live because I don't have a vice captain to handle affairs. Suddenly, Senju Makoto, who was watching the show with a smile on his face, couldn't laugh anymore. As for the one who was instantly accused of something, Omida Kichiyo's face turned pale. She thought she had completely angered the terrible and sinister Captain Unohana. But Unohana Retsu seemed to ignore Omida Kichiyo and left with Kotetsuin. It was not until Unohana Retsu's figure completely disappeared from sight that Omida Kichiyo stood up tremblingly and asked nervously. Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, Captain Unohana, isn't he angry? Makoto Senju, who vaguely guessed that Unohana Retsu was still a little dissatisfied with the matter of Seireitei, sighed and said. I don't know, maybe it's okay. However, when Omida Kichiyo heard these words, he vaguely felt a zanpakutō close to his neck, and the whole person was faintly cold. Immediately, Omida Kichiyo quickly pulled out another large stack of banknotes from his arms and stuffed them into Makoto Senju's arms without saying anything. How could Makoto Senju, who had been kind all his life, accept such money without merit? He almost refused again and again. Vice Captain Omida, what do you mean by this? No, it doesn't mean anything, just a token of appreciation. It's meaningless for Vice Captain Omida to talk like this. I don't understand what it means at all. Actually, it doesn't mean anything. It's just that I hit it off with Mr. Kurosaki Makoto. I don't know how to choose gifts, so these are the only things I can give. Please accept them, Mr. Kurosaki Makoto. This doesn't seem good. Why? And Miss Nell is so cute. These are just a small token of appreciation for Miss Nell. As Makoto Senju almost refused 3 times, Omida Kichiyo, who still insisted, stuffed a large amount of money into Nell, and only then did Makoto Senju accept it reluctantly. Well, thank you for the generosity of Vice Captain Omida. Makoto Senju said helplessly. No, 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 I'm in a hurry to go out. It's just a small token of appreciation. After a pause, Omida Kichio said cautiously. I just hope that when Mr. Kurosaki Makotao has the chance, if he can help me put in a few good words in front of Captain Unohana, and explain that I just had no intention of offending him, I would be very grateful. Don't worry about this, Vice Captain Omida. Senju Makotao said with a smile. We hit it off right away, and we will do our best to help Vice Captain Omida explain, and Captain Unohana is not a grudge-bearing person. That's good, that's good. Hearing this, Omida Kichio couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. When they were on the beach before, Omida Kichio also noticed that Senju Makotao and Unohana Retsu seemed to have a good relationship, but what Omida Kichio never expected was that Unohana Retsu would actually choose to live directly in Senju Makotao's mansion. Do you still need to introduce the other tenants to Vice Captain Omida? Senju Makotao asked. No, no need. How could Omida Kichio dare to continue staying in the courtyard? It is true that the one who is close to the water gets the moon first, but what Omida Kichio is more afraid of is that the fire in the city gate will affect the fish in the pond. Therefore, even if the other tenants can be solved with money, Omida Kichio does not want her appearance to be an eyesore to Unohana Retsu. Then, after finding a reason, Omida Kichio quickly left the courtyard. Watching Omida Kichio leave with a warm face, Senju Makotao felt a little regretful in his heart. Perhaps, letting Omida Kichio stay in the courtyard would be a good choice. At least, in this way, Omida Kichio can occasionally help him share that firepower. Unohana Retsu, Kuronko Yorishi and Soyoi Fong, the three most thoughtful and skillful female captains in the entire Seireitei, all gathered together. This drama will probably be very troublesome, right? Nailu, I will take you out to play tomorrow. Is father finally free? Nailu, who was held in Senju Makotao's arms, asked with her eyes shining faintly. Makotao Senju, who never mentioned that he was seeking refuge, said gently. Yes, as expected, Nell is the most obedient and considerate, so I decided to go out and play with Nell. Great. Upon hearing this, Nell was so excited that she hugged Makotao Senju's neck and tapped his cheeks clumsily like a chicken pecking at rice, causing Makotao Senju to laugh. At the same time, when Omida Kichio was running for her life, she used the instant step to escape from the courtyard even though she was in the state of artificial body. On the top of a high tower far away from the courtyard, several figures wearing cloaks that isolate spiritual pressure stared at the direction of the courtyard, with a bit of joy in their eyes. Found it. It seems that Lady Nell has been captured by the death gods and imprisoned in that courtyard. We must find a way to rescue Lady Nell no matter what. Chapter 614 Ching's Secret Garden, Part 3. As these five figures of different sizes raised their heads involuntarily, revealing their faces with some traces of masks, they turned out to be the five subordinates left by Grimjow in Karakura town to look for Nell. In order to avoid being noticed by the Seireitei, these five subordinates hid outside Karakura town for a few days until Grimjow sent someone to deliver a cloak that could conceal the spiritual pressure, and then hurriedly entered Karakura town to quietly look for Nell. Fortunately, they soon found Nell's trace. Unfortunately, the subordinates found that Nell had been kidnapped by the god of death and sent to the courtyard in front of them. What should we do? Attack by force. It's just that we don't know how many Shinigami there are in the courtyard, and it's said that some captain-level Shinigami are hiding in Karakura town. Don't worry, I just observed that those Shinigami seem to have all entered their artificial bodies to avoid the influence of spiritual pressure on humans. So as long as we attack fast enough and rescue Lady Nell before the Shinigami react, everything will be fine. Good idea. In that case, let's wait until late at night before we take action. Then, the five subordinates whispered about the specific battle plan and began to carefully prepare for the rescue. Time passed quickly. In order to avoid being detected and alerted by the Shinigami in advance, the five subordinates did not act rashly, but patiently hid their spiritual pressure and hid, watching the changes in the lights in the courtyard from a distance, waiting for everyone to fall asleep before starting the attack. After all, even though the Yaranses generally have a contemptuous view of Shinigami, they also know that there are some very troublesome guys among the Shinigami captains. So, there may only be one chance. I have the advantage. As the Yaranses watched from afar, a rather petite figure withdrew from the residence in the center of the courtyard, and the light of the only room in the entire courtyard that was lit went out. This scene made the hearts of the five subordinates jump in unison, and they realized that the time to take action was almost here. Attack the courtyard and bring back Nell, right now. As the leader of the five subordinates, the Yaranse know. 11 Xiaolong Qifang said in a deep voice. Get ready. Don't pay attention to the death gods along the way for a while, and go straight to where Lady Nell is. Then I will pick up Lady Nell, Nakim and Edarad will resist the counter-attack of the death gods, Dairoy will be responsible for covering, and Ilfert will quickly open the black chamber. Is everything clear? You are so long-winded. No. 16 Dairoy, who has a head of ice-white green hair and a conspicuous part of his head covered with a hat-like part formed by the residual virtual matter of the Arensei, said disapprovingly. If you ask me, we should just attack those Shinigami directly, kill all those Shinigami who dare to hold Nell hostage, and then rescue Nell. I agree with Roy. Those Shinigami are not on guard at all. This is a rare opportunity. If we can kill them all, I'm afraid Lord Aizen will personally summon us to reward us. The burly No. 13 Edorat, with short grey hair on one side and long dark red hair on the other, couldn't help but speak up in support. We are the highest ranking subordinates after the 10 Espartas. As long as we make important contributions, Lord Aizen will grant us powerful power with the Hojokyu. We may even become one of the 10 Espartas directly. As soon as these words came out, the other No. 14 and No. 15 subordinates who had not yet spoken showed strong desire in their eyes. Subordinates, 10 Espartas. Although they are ranked in this order in the Palace of the Night, their status is completely different. The 10 Espartas were not allowed to fight each other in the Palace of the Night, but whether the 10 Espartas deprived the lives of the subordinate officers and the rest of the Arensei below them was entirely up to their mood. Idiot. Xiaolong Qifang saw this and shouted in a low voice. Don't forget, some of the captains among the Shinigami are even difficult for Lord Grimjow to deal with. This remark also made the rest of the subordinate officers sober up instantly. Although these subordinate officers with numbers close to 10 thought that they were not necessarily weaker than the so-called captain-level Shinigami, the reason why they submitted to Grimjow's subordinate officers was that they were completely convinced by Grimjow's strength. The main theme of the world of Hollows. The strong prey on the weak. Therefore, after Grimjow was carried out, these subordinate officers who were terrified in their hearts regained some sobriety. During the discussion of the subordinate officers, the whole courtyard seemed to be completely quiet. Move. Xiaolong Qifang did not hesitate and headed towards the courtyard first. The other 4 Arenseis of different sizes followed him quickly, almost flickering and jumping. Hibiki. As the descendant of the Arensei, the special movement skills mastered by the Hollow showed characteristics different from the instant step and the flying footwork at this moment. Rather than saying that Hibiki is a movement step, it is closer to a special ability that can be used by the Hollow itself to shuttle through space at will, thereby shortening the distance between points. For a moment, the 5 subordinates covered their spiritual pressure with cloaks, and then moved quickly with Hibiki, almost silently approaching the edge of the courtyard. However, just as they were about to step into the courtyard, a petite figure who had watched from a distance leaving the center room of the courtyard not long ago blocked their way. Synopsis, who was wearing a maid outfit and maintained the appearance of Rem, spoke expressionlessly. Please stop. The 5 subordinates looked at each other and made eye contact. However, at this point, even the most cautious Xiaolong Qifang had no intention of retreating, and said in a low voice. Don't hesitate, do your best to get rid of this human first. However, almost as Xiaolong Qifang finished speaking, the ground with the 5 subordinates as the center suddenly glowed with a burst of spiritual light. Then, Xiaolong Qifang and other subordinates felt that their feet were empty and they felt dizzy. When they came to their senses, the surrounding environment suddenly changed. They were no longer at the edge of the courtyard, but seemed to be in a huge underground space that had been opened up. Synopsis, who still appeared in front of Xiaolong Qifang and other subordinates, stated calmly. You are too noisy. It is easy to disturb the master's normal work and rest. Where is this? Xiaolong Qifang asked solemnly. Synopsis's face, which had always protected the standard maid's appearance, changed slightly, and he said with a little more horror. One of the master's underground bases is also known as Qing's Secret Garden. You are very welcome to stay here as a guest. Chapter 615. Space in the shadow crack. The chill suddenly spread over the 5 subordinates. Although they could not feel any spiritual pressure from Synopsis, and her appearance was still so beautiful and lovely, the 5 subordinates seemed to have encountered something they could not resist. Who are you trying to scare? Human. The next moment, Dairoy, who ranked No. 16 among the Arenseis, flashed, pulled out his zanpakutō and swept it out, trying to cut Synopsis in half. Ding! A crisp sound. Dairoy stared at the nail that blocked his almost full-strength attack with incredible eyes. This seemingly cute and beautiful human maid in front of her just raised her index fingernail to block the full strength attack of herself as no. 16. How is it possible? I can, as Synopsis' finger instantly pierced into Dairoi's throat. Dairoi's voice stopped abruptly, and he knelt on his knees, and the whole person fell limply at Synopsis' feet. Until his death, Dairoy could not understand at all, as the no. 16, he was killed instantly by a seemingly harmless human maid. This crushing horror scene also made the other 4 subordinates stare at Synopsis with wide eyes, as if they were looking at a monster. Synopsis calmly picked up the maid's apron and wiped his fingers, then looked at the remaining 4 subordinates and said, "Resistance is meaningless, it will only increase despair and pain." However, in response to Synopsis, the 4 subordinates drew their zanpakutō in unison and returned to the blade. Smash it, Prince Ashenhorn. Awaken, Volcano Beast. Cut it off, Gossip Worm. In an instant, 4 Aranses in the blade form that looked exactly like monsters appeared in front of Synopsis, and the huge shadow seemed to completely submerge Synopsis. Don't get too complacent, human, I'm no. 13 Edouard a candidate Aranse who can be promoted to the Espadas at any time. Don't underestimate us, the 4 of us will make even the real Espadas give way. Amid roars, the largest Edouard and Nakim attacked Synopsis from the left and right at the same time. Their amazing momentum and size made it seem as if a mountain would explode in front of them. Boom. The moment the huge Edouard and Nakim collided with each other after returning to their original form, the amazing air wave generated seemed to be a huge explosion, and the violent air wave spread wildly in a ring shape, and thick smoke quickly filled the air. However, after Edouard and Nakim waved their hands to disperse the smoke, the expected body of Synopsis did not exist, but, crack. 2 crisp bone fracture sounds sounded at the same time from the sides of Edouard and Nakim. Edouard and Nakim, ranked no. 13 and no. 14 respectively, looked in the direction of the sound, but they were still in a state of returning to the blade, and the necks of Xiaolongqufang and Ilvet were held in the hands of Synopsis. Xiaolongqufang and Ilvet's heads seemed to have completely lost their support points, hanging limply, and the spiritual pressure on their bodies completely dissipated in the blink of an eye. Dead. Xiaolongqufang, ranked no. 11, and Ilvet, ranked no. 15, were killed instantly after returning to the blade before Edouard and Nakim could react. At this moment, Edouard and Nakim completely realized that the 2 sides were not at the same level at all. Unbearable fear came spontaneously. Then, Edouard and Nakim, without a moment of hesitation, tried to escape in different directions at the same time. This scene also made Synopsis' expression slightly dark, and he spoke. The guests are so willful. They have already agreed to stay as guests. It's so rude to leave without permission. The next moment, Synopsis, who seemed to have a negligible spiritual pressure like a human, suddenly burst out with a terrifying spiritual pressure of a vast top-level Aranse, and pressed down on Edouard and Nakim like a sky collapse. Edouard and Nakim's huge bodies sank, and their figures unconsciously paused for a moment. Crack. Synopsis' figure appeared at the necks of Edouard and Nakim in different directions almost at the same time. With a wave of his hand knife, a bone-breaking sound that made people's teeth ache was heard. Edouard and Nakim seemed to have lost all their strength in an instant, and their huge bodies fell to the ground. At this moment, the top of the stone wall that originally looked like an underground space around them in the eyes of the 5 subordinates quickly faded, and was replaced by a dark area that seemed to have no boundaries. Synopsis knelt respectfully on one knee in one direction, bowed his head and said, "Master, everything has been solved." Synopsis responded with a plain voice and a figure that seemed to have been standing in front of Synopsis for a long time. "Well done, Synopsis." "Yes." Synopsis' calm expression was a little excited after receiving the affirmation. He slowly raised his head and the figure that came into his sight was Senju Cheng. As Senju Cheng raised his palm, the speed of fading on the top of the stone wall suddenly accelerated countless times. Even the ground under his feet and the surrounding walls quickly dispersed in the form of spirit particles and gathered towards Senju Cheng. What appeared in front of Synopsis at this moment was not the underground space in the normal concept. Instead, it was like being in a dark space without boundaries. What was under his feet was a continuous garden lawn that seemed to be full of vitality. In the center of this large garden lawn, there was a group of buildings similar to a classical palace. All this undoubtedly formed a strong and shocking visual impact in the eyes of Synopsis. Although it was not the first time for Synopsis to arrive here, he still felt an incomparable shock from the bottom of his heart, as if he had seen a miracle. Synopsis had once witnessed with his own eyes the great master, with unimaginable power, construct this spiritual space in the gaps of shadows in Karakura town, a major spiritual place. The master named this special spiritual space Makoto's secret garden. And what appeared in front of Synopsis at this moment was not Senju Makoto's real body, but in a sense, a puppet similar to Ramen. The only difference is that these puppets are remotely controlled by Senju Makoto's consciousness. Senju Makoto looked down at Synopsis in front of him and asked, "How does it feel to use your new body?" Chapter 616. Aren't Seireitei now? Chapter 616. Aren't Seireitei now? There is no problem with this body anymore. Synopsis answered with a voice that seemed to suppress his excitement. The spirit state and the instrument state can be switched instantly at any time. Even if you keep the human body, you can perfectly exert your own power. From now on, even if you are in a human body, you can still dedicate your power to the master. Senju Makoto, who was wearing a white coat similar to that of a doctor or a researcher, nodded when he heard this, and then signaled Synopsis to follow the bodies of the 5 subordinates and go to the palace complex in the center. In the past, with Senju Makoto's caution and carefulness, he would naturally not really open up an underground space and then conduct various research involving his own deep-level secrets in the underground space. With the means of Uehara Kisuken days and Sosuk, a mere space opened underground, no matter how much defense is taken, it is impossible to perfectly block the prying of Uehara Kisuken days and Sosuk. Therefore, whether it is the underground space of the original flower shop or the underground space under the courtyard now, they are just empty shells used to conceal people's eyes and ears. What is left inside are just some traces of practicing Quincy skills. As for the place that Senju Makoto really regards as a place to hide secrets, it is naturally necessary to ensure complete safety. Until Senju Makoto occasionally flipped through the ancient Quincy books of the Ishida family and found a very interesting statement mentioned in a certain annotation by Ishida Sokjin on the use of spirit particles. Spirit particles also have shadows. Of course, this so-called shadow is not a shadow in common sense, but more like a part hidden in the spirit particles that cannot be observed. Although the deceased Ishida Sokjin did not tell Senju Makoto 8th watch, who had disappeared for thousands of years, when Senju Makoto saw this annotation, he also realized Ishida Sokjin's hint. However, since the shadow cannot be directly observed, compared with the invisible has no boundaries. If Yuabark is hiding in it, unless the specific location of Yuabark in the shadow is known, even if Senju Makoto tries to find it, the result will only be like looking for a needle in a haystack. However, this made Senju Makoto realize that the shadow is a good place to hide secrets, so he built a spirit subspace in the shadow of the heavy spiritual land Karakura town as a real secret base. The benefits of this is that Senju Makoto allows others to enter, or exposes the specific coordinates of Makoto's secret garden in the shadow. Otherwise, even if the rest of the people search frantically in the shadow, it is almost impossible to find Makoto's secret garden, let alone spy on or invade Makoto's secret garden. In order to facilitate various research in this spirit subspace, Senju Makoto also specially created a puppet body for himself, and then controlled the puppet to continue research here. Passing through the beautiful flowers outside, when they arrived at the main gate of the palace complex, a man who looked quite gentle came to meet them, and then helped Synopsis track the bodies of the subordinates to lead the way into the palace complex, and said, "Master Senju, the various materials and operating rooms you asked for have been prepared in advance and are available for you to use at any time. Now, there is no need to be so polite. Your sister in Uehara is my student. There is no need for honorifics," Senju Makoto said while manipulating the puppet. "No." Inoue now shook his head and answered seriously. "Even if Oraim and Master Senju have a good personal relationship, it was Master Senju who gave me a new life and allowed me to fully restore my self-awareness. Otherwise, once I sink into confusion like other hollows, even if I evolve into Killian or even a higher level of hollow, I will definitely lose my personal consciousness as Inoue now." After a pause, before Senju Makoto could speak, Inoue now continued. "Not to mention that if it weren't for Senju-sama's protection, I might have committed the unforgivable crime of attacking and killing Oraim, so I'm afraid I can't repay Senju-sama's kindness to the Inoue family even if I live my whole life." Senju Makoto heard this and stopped trying to persuade Inoue now. Or rather, this was not the first time that Senju Makoto had persuaded Inoue, but Inoue still insisted on his own ideas. Senju Makoto secretly brought Inoue, who was an ordinary hollow, to this spirit particle space, and then used the ability of spirit particle control to make Inuyasha realize the Seireitei, and unexpectedly completely restored the individual consciousness of Inuyasha. After that, Inuyasha was left in this palace by Senju Cheng to play a role similar to that of a butler. During this period of time, Inuyasha also tried his best to repay Senju Cheng's kindness and took care of many trivial matters in the palace in an orderly manner. Thank you for your hard work, but it may take some time before you can meet Doraemon, Senju Cheng said. It's okay, Inuyasha said with a warm smile on his face. Now that Doraemon is being taken care of by Senju-sama, I'm afraid she no longer needs me, her brother, to nag her. As long as I know that Doraemon is living a happy and healthy life, I feel extremely satisfied, Senju Cheng said after hearing this. You are such an excellent brother. Don't worry, I will protect Doraemon and allow you to meet Doraemon later. During this moment of casual chatting, Senju Cheng also arrived at the special operating room in that palace. Then Synopsis and Inuyasha fixed the bodies of the 5 subordinates on the operating tables respectively, and then respectfully left the door. Senju Cheng habitually put on disposable gloves skillfully, and looked at the 5 fresh experimental subjects in front of him calmly. Perhaps, these 5 subordinates did not know until their death that all their actions were under the control of Senju Cheng from beginning to end. The cloaks that concealed their spiritual pressure were not prepared by Grimjow at all. Grimjow would never think of these details. These cloaks were all sent to them by Seireitei in the name of Grimjow. These cloaks do have the function of concealing spiritual pressure, but at the same time, these cloaks also have some special spiritual particles attached to them, allowing Makoto Senju to directly observe with the naked eye that it is like a red dot appeared in the microscopic world of spiritual particles in a piece of blue. The reason for this is that Makoto Senju has some special ideas about the body of the Seireitei, and it is not suitable to do it to his own Seireitei, so he can only let Aizen Sosok sacrifice a little and contribute these subordinates to use. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 617. Artificial Secondary Blade. Chapter 617. Artificial Secondary Blade. At the same time, after the 5 subordinates were forcibly brought to the location of Makoto's secret garden by Synopsis in the present world, a moment later, Kuroko Yorishi appeared nearby in a few flashes, and scanned the surroundings with a puzzled look. Kuroko Yorishi had already fallen asleep, but he was always highly alert. When the 5 subordinates approached the courtyard with a loud noise, the weak spatial fluctuations still did not escape Kuroko Yorishi's perception. It's just, Kuroko Yorishi's eyes scanned every suspicious area around him sharply, searching for possible unknown enemies. Illusion. Or where did he run to? Soon, Kuroko Yorishi noticed Synopsis, who seemed to have just walked out of a blind spot. Swoosh. The next moment, Kuroko Yorishi appeared in front of Synopsis, looking Synopsis up and down. Master Yorishi, do you have any instructions? Synopsis asked with standard-made etiquette. Just now there were some traces of hollows here. Did you deal with them? Kuroko Yorishi asked. Well, I have dealt with them to avoid disturbing the rest of the store manager and the guests. Synopsis explained calmly, as if she was helping the guests to drive away some mosquitoes that were approaching. Kuroko Yorishi heard this and walked around Synopsis curiously, saying, Speaking of which, I have always been a little curious about the relationship between you and Makoto-kun. You're obviously human, but you seem to have unexpected strength. Master Yorishi is too kind. It's just a little ability that can help the store manager solve small troubles. Synopsis answered calmly. Are you also a queency? Kuroko Yorishi asked. In response, Synopsis maintained the etiquette of a maid, but kept silent, and had no intention of answering Kuroko Yorishi. Can't you say it? Kuroko Yorishi continued to ask. If Master Yorishi wants to know more, you can ask the store manager. Synopsis replied. Hearing this, Kuroko Yorishi looked around the surroundings, which did not even have any traces of fighting left. Then, Kuroko Yorishi disappeared in an instant, and his black figure blended perfectly into the darkness, and quietly appeared above the room where Senju Makoto lived. Then, Kuroko Yorishi found a small hole that he could sneak in through, and looked up into the room. Senju Makoto was sleeping soundly in the room, and Nell was lying on Senju Makoto's chest, drooling from the corners of her mouth. Seeing that his position was taken by Nell, Kuronko Yoichi hesitated for a moment and still did not go in. 3 people, too crowded. More importantly, Nell drooled when she slept, and Kuronko Yoichi was afraid that he would be drowned when he woke up. And in Makoto's secret garden, the operation that Senju Makoto had envisioned began to be performed on the 5 subordinates. As a kind and dedicated doctor, if he conducts cruel experiments on living organisms, Senju Makoto feels that this is somewhat against his ethics as a doctor. However, since these 5 subordinates have become corpses, it is okay for Senju Makoto to slightly bend his moral bottom line. From the perspective of the god of death, he is just making the best use of everything. At least, Senju Makoto did not conduct various living experiments and transformations on the hollows like Kurosachi Mayuri did. And what Senju Makoto intends to verify on these 5 subordinates is the problem related to Nell. Nell, Senju Makoto considered whether to completely cure Nell's injuries decades ago and let Nell truly restore to the form of a vast held-level Arensei. At the time, Nell refused, because she did not want to be unable to act coquettishly and close to Senju Makoto after she became bigger. However, Senju Makoto naturally could not be really convinced by this reason and completely ignore Nell's injuries. Now, Nell can only temporarily restore to the form of a vast held-level Arensei when she is in a very intense mood and intends to fight. And according to Senju Makoto's confirmation, Nell does not actually have a second personality. Nell is always Nell, the only difference is that after Nell recovers her true form, the memories, combat experience, and way of thinking that fell into a dormant state due to her injuries will all be restored. Therefore, Senju Makoto's plan is to completely repair Nell's injuries, so that Nell can maintain her level as a vast old-level Arensei, and package Nell's adult form, combat experience, way of thinking, etc. into the Arensei's zanpakutō. In other words, artificially create a second return to the blade. In this way, while satisfying Nell's wish to maintain her current appearance, Nell can also completely repair her injuries, restore her potential, and even continue to evolve as a Great Hollow. However, even if Senju Makoto's understanding of the spirit of the Great Hollow is even far greater than that of Unohana Retsu, this unconventional idea undoubtedly needs a lot of practice to prove and support it, otherwise Senju Makoto will not be able to apply it to Nell. These 5 hollows made of the Hojoku became the important materials that Makoto Senju had been waiting for several days to be delivered to his door. As Makoto Senju went to the pure doctor state, the 5 hollow bodies lying there were subconsciously interpreted as different spiritual structures in his eyes. The first step. First separate their return to the blade state in the form of surgery. The second step. Because the killing between hollows will not be like the death god killing the hollow, so that the hollow's spirit body will quickly decompose into spirit particles and return to nature, but will expose the spirit particles and spiritual power of the spirit body to the greatest extent for the winner to devour. Therefore, Makoto Senju can artificially create injuries similar to Nell's when the corpse is still hot and the spiritual power in the body has not dissipated. The third step. While repairing their spirit bodies that have also undergone different changes, try to maintain the appearance of the injured spirit bodies unchanged, and then package the repaired parts with their return to the blade to form a zanpakutō that can return to the blade twice. Unlike the complex zanpakutō system of the Shinigami, although the weapons of the Arensei are called zanpakutō, their zanpakutō were essentially the condensation of the true posture and power of the Arensei. Therefore, in the corresponding theory that Senju Makoto calculated in advance, all of this is undoubtedly feasible. However, the difficulty of actually operating it is far beyond Senju Makoto's expectations. Artificially creating a secondary return blade involves many aspects of the problem. If you are not careful, even if you succeed in sealing it, it is easy to form a weird zanpakutō. Chapter 618 Born in Rome. For example, the secondary blade should have been a normal change, with the first blade becoming longer and the second blade becoming thicker. However, the artificially created secondary blade failed, with the first blade only making the skin longer, and the second blade only making the blood vessels thicker, and the rest becoming a messy growth. Failure. Failure. Still failure. It was not until the experimental subjects were almost exhausted that Senju Makoto succeeded for the first time on Xiaolong and then succeeded again on Dairoi. After many experiments, Senju Makoto summed up a lot of experience, and he was quite confident that he could complete the treatment of Nell in one go. Then, Senju Makoto asked Inoue to come in and clean up the operating room, or in other words, he asked Inoue to absorb these hollows whose levels were far higher than his own by devouring spirit particles. After all, although Inoue had also become a hollow, His real level was only that of an ordinary hollow, and he was far from even the level of Killian. This scene made Synopsis, who secretly returned to Makao's secret garden, show a bit of envy in his eyes. Although Synopsis' level is no longer worthy at these Achuka's level Arensei corpses, even if Synopsis devours these Achuka's level Arenseis, it will not have any effect. However, when Synopsis evolved from an ordinary hollow to an Achuka's, and then experienced many dangers in the Achuka's stage, he did not get many Achuka's level trophies. However, Inuyasha in front of him did not have to do anything, and he got all this easily thanks to his sister Inuyasha. Some people can't go to Rome in their entire lives, but some people were born in Rome. In this comparison, Synopsis looked at Inuyasha with emotion and a bit of envy. However, Synopsis did not have any complaints. Maybe Inuyasha did not have to do anything, but Inuyasha was also whinged and bled for her master. Inuyasha only devoured the corpse of a subordinate officer, and the spiritual pressure emanating from his body instantly reached the level of Killian. However, since he had already become an Arensei, Inuyasha, who was promoted to Killian, did not need to transform into a huge form with chaotic consciousness, and even his appearance did not change at all. After Inuyasha completely devoured the corpses of the 5 subordinate officers, Inuyasha automatically and uncontrollably released his blade to show his true form as a hollow, and his appearance began to change dramatically. Inuyasha's body continued to expand and shrink, and his mind also fell into a certain degree of confusion. His eyes were scattered and his mouth kept muttering inaudible words. However, Synopsis was undoubtedly accustomed to Inuyasha's state, and he reminded him. Don't think about the spirit body, keep thinking about the most important memories. Important memories, Inuyasha murmured, and a worn picture emerged in his mind, which was constantly mixed with a lot of memories and in chaos. That was when Inuyasha moved to Karakura town with Inuyasha. Although the daily work was hard and tiring, he could always see Orihim's smiling face when he opened the door and he got home. Welcome home, brother Orihime. Inuyasha roared, and the spiritual pressure on his body suddenly increased, completely crossing the level of Achuka's. Witnessing this scene, Inuyasha's care and cherishment for Inuyasha made Senju Cheng once again quite emotional, and he also understood more clearly why the Seireitei could only have a laissez-faire attitude towards Hyukomundo. Compared with the cultivation cycle of the Shinigami, which often takes decades, the evolution speed of the Hollows is too amazing. Once it tries to control Hyukomundo, the Seireitei is likely to be dragged into a long-term state of war, constantly provoking the Hollows to attack the Shinigami. After all, the spirits of the Shinigami are also extremely attractive to the Hollows. Then, Senju Cheng asked Synopsis to take Inuyasha, who had just been promoted to the level of Achuka's, away, and teach Inuyasha a little about his combat abilities and experience. After Inuyasha and Synopsis left, Senju, who was sleeping in the courtyard room, patted Nell's back with his palm, and Nell instantly disappeared in the courtyard. However, when Nell was teleported to the operating table in Makao's secret garden by Senju, she still looked like a fool sleeping with drooling, which made Senju laugh. Then, Senju couldn't help but reach out and gently scratch Nell's small nose, and then gently touch Nell's forehead with his fingers. Suddenly, Nell, who was originally drowsy, completely fainted, and even her pink little tongue was weakly spit out. Senju's eyes became focused and serious, and his hands emerged with green light belonging to Yudeo and enveloped Nell, and began to treat Nell. Stripping, healing, separation, reconstruction, compared with the experimental nature of those subordinates, Senju treated Nell with extraordinary care and attention, and completed every step as perfectly as possible. Time passed unnoticed. When Senju finally took off the disposable gloves on her hands, the changes on the surface of Nell, who was lying on the operating table, were minimal. Only the missing part of the mask on her head had been completely repaired. However, in fact, Nell became the second Arensei in the entire Hyukomundo to have a secondary blade after Ulquiorra. However, unlike Ulquiorra, who broke his face again after being broken by the Hodyoku, thus forming a secondary blade, Nell's secondary blade was artificially created by Senju, allowing Nell to use the power of Vastop freely even if she maintained her lily body. Immediately afterwards, Senju sent Nell, who was still in a coma, back to the room in the courtyard, and Senju's body sat up. After undergoing a full-body operation, Nell's clothes were naturally cut off in the operating room in advance, so Nell was now in a naked state. However, as a qualified godfather, Senju also has clothes in his room for Nailu to change at any time. Therefore, Senju Cheng put the still drowsy Nailu on the quilt to continue sleeping, and he got up and searched for clothes in the room, ready to change Nailu. Well, this one doesn't look good, this one, let's go for this one. Just as Senju Cheng sat in front of the closet and slowly picked out a small dress, he stood up and was somewhat stunned to see Nailu sitting in the quilt and looking at him with round eyes. Chapter 619 Sin, Antelope Night. Two pairs of eyes stared at each other, then, Senju Cheng spoke gently. Good morning, Nailu. For Nailu, it was undoubtedly a very happy thing to see Senju Cheng the first thing every morning. Nailu also subconsciously responded to Senju Cheng with a sweet smile. Then Nailu realized something, looked down, and found that something was wrong with her condition. She tilted her head slightly and asked, where are my clothes? Senju Cheng raised the little skirt in his hand and explained gently. Nailu ate her pants last night, so I changed them for you. Originally, Senju Cheng thought that this explanation was enough for the pure and innocent Nailu. After all, even after treatment, if Nailu did not take the initiative to return to the blade for the first time, Nailu's thinking, appearance, body shape, etc. would not change. But what surprised Senju Cheng was that Nailu frowned as if she was recalling something, muttering to herself. Unohana's sister seemed to ask me to do something in this situation. Otherwise, something terrible will happen. What? Senju Cheng, who was a little far away from Nell, didn't hear it clearly. Oh, I remember it. Nell's eyes lit up, and then in Senju Cheng's eyes reflecting the scene in front of her, Nell's mouth slowly opened and made a big inhalation. This action is, Senju Cheng realized something, his pupils couldn't help shrinking, and his figure quickly flashed towards Nell. Help! The next moment, the call from Nell's mouth just broke out, and Senju Cheng's palm covered Nell's mouth in time. His eyes were full of panic. However, even if Senju Cheng's reaction just now is fast, he did not have the ability to predict, and still let a little weak sound spread out from Senju Cheng's room. And Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi's room were just next to Senju Cheng's. No matter how weak this sound was, it instantly alarmed Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi. In Senju Cheng's perception, Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi rushed towards him almost instantly. But, Senju Cheng looked down at Nell who was blinking innocently in his hand, and his mouth twitched. This close-fitting cotton jacket has a little leak. Oh, when did Unohana teacher secretly train Nell to be obedient, and even issued such an order in advance that completely regarded Senju Cheng as hentai? However, although Senju Cheng knew how pure and innocent he was, it was difficult to explain, under the premise that Nell shouted for help. If he was not careful, he would inevitably end up in disgrace. Nell, don't make a sound next time. Senju Cheng said hurriedly. Looking at Senju Cheng's serious expression, Nell nodded subconsciously. Although Senju Cheng's order was in conflict with Unohana, Nell would undoubtedly subconsciously obey Senju Cheng's order first. Then, Senju Cheng, who was already too late, lifted Nell up and stuffed her into the quilt. He only had time to cover up the ups and downs of the quilt so that there was no problem on the surface. The next moment, Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi rushed in almost at the same time. Bang! What appeared in front of Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi was Senju Cheng's slightly innocent and confused eyes. Unohana looked at Senju Cheng who was safe and sound, then scanned the room and asked. Cheng, what happened to you? I think I heard a cry for help. Yes, I heard it too. Kuronko Yorishi said. Cry for help? Senju Cheng looked puzzled, as if he had not reacted, but his hands hidden under the quilt were busy dressing Nell with very small movements. At this moment, Senju Cheng was sitting on the bed, and Nell was hiding in the narrow gap between Senju Cheng's arms and the quilt, hiding the sight of Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi through the quilt. Of course, from the perspective of Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi, they could only see a confused Senju Cheng who had just gotten up. I didn't shout for help. Senju Cheng seemed to answer slowly, trying to delay time. However, Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi were obviously not the kind of people who were easily fooled, and with their keenness, they immediately determined that the faint sound was made by Nell. Now, after scanning the room, they did not find any trace of Nell. Cheng, is Nell in your room? Unohana asked with a gentle and concerned tone. Kuronko Yorishi also thought of something, and turned his eyes to look at the quilt covered by Senju Cheng and said, Master, it seems that Nell stayed here with you last night. Where did Nell go? However, in the short time gained through the conversation, Senju Cheng had successfully put the small skirt on Nell's waist, and then he only needed to lift the shoulder straps. The crisis is over. Senju Cheng felt relieved, knowing that his reputation was finally saved. Of course, it wasn't that Senju Cheng was henpecked or something, and he was afraid that Unohana would draw his sword and chop him down in a rage. Senju Cheng simply didn't want unnecessary misunderstandings to happen and wanted to preserve his reputation. After all, committing evil deeds against a little lily was his fault. If it was Seireitei lying in Senju Cheng's arms instead of Nell, Senju Cheng would never panic. Therefore, Senju Cheng, who was certain in his heart, smiled and asked back. "Guess where Nell's naughty child is hiding?" Nell curled up in the quilt, letting her father move her without making a sound, struggling and pure eyes looking up at Senju Cheng without making a sound, but just as Senju Cheng grabbed Nell's arm and was about to pass it through the shoulder strap of her skirt, Nell's palm accidentally touched a familiar object in the quilt. Driven by instinct, Nailu subconsciously held it. Suddenly, a cold and calm voice sounded faintly in Nailu's head, and Nailu also murmured unconsciously, "Sin, Antelope Night." In an instant, Nailu's originally weak spiritual pressure suddenly surged countless times, and even formed a violent storm that spread to the surroundings, instantly blowing away the bedding cover in Senju Cheng. What made Senju Cheng's pupils shrink was Nailu's spiritual weight that quickly recovered from the appearance of a Lolita to a queen, pressing heavily on him, and there was also a seemingly endless space in front of him. Chapter 620. Deep love between father and daughter. Senju Cheng. Time seemed to have completely stopped for a moment. And the little skirt that was about to be put on Nell was only put on her waist at this moment. Senju Cheng was still holding the little skirt with one hand, and the other hand was on Nell's thigh. Such a posture, such a look, such an action. Not only Senju Cheng was stunned, but even Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi were also completely stunned. The next moment, Unohana sinister voice slowly floated into Senju Cheng's ears. "I was wondering what Makoto was doing in the room, and he even made a cry for help, so that's it," Kuronko Yorishi also said with a look of dissatisfaction as if his fish was secretly licked by other cats. "Master, this is really too much. You actually cheated on me. When did you bring such a hollow?" As Nell turned her head to look at Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi, they were almost the plus version of Nell in every aspect, with the same hair color, eye color, facial features, etc. Which made Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi's expressions darken. "Makoto, do you still want to explain that Nell is not your biological daughter?" Unohana tilted his head and asked with a horrified expression. At this moment, Kuronko Yorishi also stood on the same side as Unohana and added fuel to the fire. Or maybe it's because the master took care of Nell, so now Nell's mother is repaying the master in this way? This series of questions that seemed to be about to erupt also made Senju Cheng, who was deeply trapped in the towering snow peaks, come back to his senses and quickly explained. "Misunderstanding, this is Nell." "Nell." Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi heard the words, looking at the cool queen sitting in Senju Cheng's arms, whose figure was no less than theirs, and they could not connect her with the cute lily Nell who seemed to be different from the little one. Facing the undisguised suspicion in Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi's eyes, Senju Cheng tried hard to concentrate, not letting his attention be attracted by the red dot, and hurriedly explained. "This is really Nell. I was just playing hide and seek with Nell, and I didn't expect Nell to suddenly become like this." "Do you think she is Nell? Don't you think she is more like Nell's mother?" Kuronko Yorishi asked back. "She is really Nell," Senju Cheng argued weakly. Even though Senju Cheng knew very well that if it were anyone else, it would be impossible for them to easily believe such a ridiculous statement. Then, Senju Cheng looked at Nell in his arms, and met her unique light green eyes. Unlike the innocent and ignorant eyes of Nell in her lily form, the eyes of Nell in her sister form were filled with a kind of clear stupidity, and the look she gave to Senju Cheng revealed an almost overflowing sense of intimacy. "Nell, say something to prove it for me," Senju Cheng said hurriedly. Nell, who had been sitting calmly after returning to the sword, heard the words and spoke like a lake. "Father just ordered Nell not to speak no matter what. Can you speak now?" "Yes, Nell, explain quickly," Senju Cheng said hurriedly. "Unohana's sister, Yorishi's sister, I am father's daughter Nell." However, Nell's answer was without turning her head, and the reflection of her light green eyes was still the shadow of Senju Cheng, and she spoke. "Father, it's great to finally see you in this form. Then, Nell didn't shy away from her current state, lying close to Senju Makoto's arms, and then gently rubbed Senju Makoto's neck with her face. Oh, for hollows, they don't have many moral rules between humans and death gods. Like, hate, hollows' emotions are often simple and pure, even for the great hollows of vast old level. And for Nell, even if she is returning to the blade and recovering many forgotten memories in the past, her love and fascination for Senju Makoto will not change. Oh, in the long term that is often filled with loneliness and emptiness for hollows, everything that happened after meeting Senju Makoto is full of different important colors. Family, it's great. Nell sniffed Senju Makoto's familiar breath, and her empty heart seemed to be filled with something in an instant. In the form of Lolita, Nilo acts more by instinct and intuition. She judges that Senju Makoto is her father, so she trusts him and is close to him without hesitation. But in the form of a queen, Nilo undoubtedly has wisdom that is no less than that of humans. It is for this reason that Nilo clearly and intuitively understands that Senju Makoto is her father. And her own returned blade has changed, and she can restore this form. It must be that her father secretly healed her, right? You are so gentle, father. Thinking of this, Nilu's palms can't help but hug Senju Makoto tightly, and her cheeks are constantly rubbing against him. In this instinctive way that is somewhat similar to a sheep, she expresses her fascination and love for Senju Makoto. However, this scene should have been a picture of the deep affection between father and daughter, when Nilu is almost naked and in this unique posture and action, her words and deeds are undoubtedly more like Nilu and Senju Makoto showing their affection in front of no one, and even flirting. Yunohanaretsu's knuckles faintly made a crisp sound, and Kuronko Yorishi stared at Nell's S-shaped back, and the cat's pupils completely shrank. At this moment, Yunohanaretsu and Kuronko Yorishi's thoughts, inexplicably became highly unified. I was careless. Before, I only regarded Yunohanaretsu or Shifen Yuan Yorishi as my enemy, but I didn't expect that the real confidant and big trouble had been hiding beside me with that harmless appearance, and was even stolen without knowing it. Hollows are indeed the enemies of the gods of death. Only Senju Makoto felt deeply tortured at this moment. Was Senju Makoto moved by Nell's true confession? He didn't dare to move at all. In this posture, Senju Makoto could feel something clearly even if he moved a little, so how could he dare to move? In fact, Senju Makoto felt that his body had completely stiffened, for fear that he would touch something he shouldn't touch. As for pushing Nilo away, Senju Makoto had no idea where to start, and felt that it was inappropriate for him to touch Nilo anywhere, so he could only speak with some difficulty. Nilu, be good, let me go first. No, Nilu still wants to continue hugging father. Nilu said subconsciously. Chapter 621 Kudo Sag, third update continue. At this moment, Senju Makoto's face turned pale. Feeling the eyes of Yunohanaretsu and Kuronko Yoichi, it was as if he was looking at the father of an evil ghost. That look seemed to have seen through some truth, as if Senju Makoto had an impure goal towards Nell. Only Senju Makoto knew how pure and innocent he was. All this was an accident and coincidence. However, before Senju Makoto could think of how to explain his innocence through weak words, Yunohanaretsu had slowly reached out and closed the door behind him. Kuronko Yoichi began to set up a ghost barrier around the room to isolate sound and spiritual pressure. Senju Makoto. Akido-sag, wait a minute. The next moment, Kuronko Yoichi had instantly recovered his spiritual body state, and swept a whip kid towards Nell's waist mercilessly. However, Nell at this moment was not the innocent and ignorant silly white sweet lily before. As the only vast top-level hollow who is completely independent of the entire Hukomundo except Stark. Although Nell also dislikes meaningless battles, so Nell does not show any talent in the battle side, but it does not mean that Nell is not strong. Nell only raised her hand and steadily blocked Shifen Yuan Yorishi's sweep. Yorishi, what do you mean? Nell asked back. You took my place. Shifen Yuan Yorishi said without concealing. In response to Shifen Yuan Yorishi, Nell's firm words without hesitation. That's really sorry, but father's words, Nell will not give up to anyone. Then it seems that there is no room for negotiation. It is instinct for a cat to possess its master. Almost as soon as Shifen Yuan Yorishi finished speaking, Shifen Yuan Yorishi launched a violent attack on Nell, and instantly kicked Nell, who was not good at fighting, out of Senju Makoto's arms. This also completely angered Nell, who was pure and peaceful in nature, and she clenched her zanpakutō to fight back against Shifen Yuan Yorishi. For a while, Shifen Yuan Yorishi and Nell were completely in a fight. This made Senju Cheng helpless and a little afraid to look directly at their fight. After all, Shifu Yorishi and Nell were almost not covered up, and Shifu Yorishi and Nell each had a unique personality, and they didn't care how much they were exposed in front of Senju Cheng. Therefore, rather than saying that it was a fight, it was better to say that it was a collision that was much more beautiful than the most beautiful dance in the world. Dare not look, Senju Cheng subconsciously raised his hands to cover his eyes, but he couldn't help but worry that they would fight too hard and get hurt, so he couldn't help but leave a little more gap between his fingers holding his eyes. Of course, it was not much, and it was enough to be able to observe the battle process slightly. This was also for Senju Cheng to stop the fight between Shifu Yorishi and Nell in time when necessary. As for those things that were unnecessary to see, Senju Cheng naturally didn't see them at all, let alone remember them in his mind. All Senju Cheng could see were the things that he should see. Wait, I seem to have forgotten something. Suddenly, Senju Cheng frowned, feeling that his attention was temporarily distracted, and he seemed to have forgotten something more important. The next moment, under the instinct of fighting, Senju Cheng, who was sitting on the bed, subconsciously shrank his head. A zanpakutō passed through the hair on Senju Cheng's head with great danger. Suddenly, the hair on Senju Cheng's back stood up, and the whole person retreated instantly. Only then did he realize that Unohana had left the artificial body at some point, and had drawn his zanpakutō and stood behind him. Unohana showed a gentle and terrifying smile to Senju Cheng and said, "Makoto, I thought you were watching intently, and even didn't keep some basic vigilance." I didn't, teacher, you understand me." Senju Cheng laughed awkwardly and tried to explain. "I'm not that kind of person at all. This morning, all these were just misunderstandings. I didn't know that Nell would grow bigger beforehand." Unohana narrowed his eyes and asked, "Didn't know beforehand? Makoto, are you sure you want to perfunctorily answer me with such an underhanded answer?" Senju Cheng couldn't help but feel guilty when he heard this. As a person who respects teachers, Senju Cheng has deliberately deceived his teachers on one hand. Although everything this morning was indeed an accident, Senju Cheng emphasized that he didn't know that Nell would turn into a queen, which was purely to add some persuasiveness to his explanation. All this was discovered too suddenly. Senju Cheng didn't expect that Nell would scream after waking up and attract Unohana and Kuronko Yorishi, and he didn't expect that he didn't have time to tell Nell about the second return to the blade. Nell subconsciously returned to the blade, which triggered a series of stories. No, this is already an accident. However, Senju Cheng knew that in this situation, he would definitely not admit it even if he was beaten to death. If you want to deceive your teacher, then deceive your teacher. More importantly, if you don't like your teacher, there will be more things that can't be explained. Senju Cheng blinked innocently and defended with a bitter face. "I have only adopted Nell for a few days, and I may not know more than Unohana teacher, so I really don't know. However, this level of explanation is naturally far from enough." Unohana continued to question. "Then why is Nell's little skirt in this state? Why is it in that posture?" "Accident, coincidence," Senju Cheng defended, saying an answer that he didn't even believe. The disciple grew crooked. "This is the teacher's fault." Unohana smiled gently and terrifyingly, then raised the zanpakutō in his hand and said, "But it doesn't matter, Makoto, the teacher will help you make the necessary corrections and eliminate all the redundant and unnecessary ones." The next moment, before Senju Cheng could speak, Unohana, who could no longer suppress his murderous intent and impulse, approached Senju Cheng and slashed his zanpakutō from bottom to top. Senju Cheng. Suddenly, Senju Cheng felt a chill in his spine, and instinctively condensed a zanpakutō in his hand to resist. Ding! However, the noise in Senju Cheng's room was so loud that it was not leaked to the outside world. Synopsis also appeared at the right time and stood guard outside the room to prevent the appearance of other people from disturbing the necessary communication between the host and other important guests. After getting up, Seireitei, who lived in a corner of the courtyard, inexplicably felt that the courtyard seemed to be much quieter than she had imagined, and she even had a vague feeling that she had missed something important. Chapter 618 has been temporarily banned again, and I have applied for unbanning it. Sorry. In addition, the daily plot of the present world is almost over here. Chapter 622 Kill Him, Leopard King. However, just when Seireitei was puzzled by the quietness of the courtyard, and hesitated whether to go out to open the Fenlin glasses shop, or follow her faint curiosity to explore whether there are any secrets hidden in the courtyard, a strong spiritual pressure appeared above Karakura town without any cover. Boom. Without the slightest hesitation, as if he was afraid that others would not know about his arrival, Grimjow Jagek. All the death gods hiding in Karakura town, get out. Grimjow's voice, which seemed to be full of anger, echoed wildly above Karakura town, and a flash of light began to condense in his hand, as if he was ready to wreak havoc on Karakura town. This violent spiritual pressure reaction also instantly attracted the attention of everyone in Karakura town. Makoto Senju, Unohana Retsu, Shifen Yuan Yorishi and Nell who were in the barrier also sensed Grimjow's presence at the first time. Grimjow, well done. Senju Makoto was so eager to praise Grimjow in public, but on the surface he was completely serious. The powerful spiritual pressure that made the space seem to tremble suddenly burst out, causing Unohana Retsu, Shiwen Yorishi and Nell to pause. The fun is over for now. Grimjow's appearance may not be the vanguard of Asian Sussex's full-scale attack on Karakura town, Senju Makoto said in a serious tone. Then, Unohana Retsu, Shiwen Yorishi and Nell's expressions also straightened, knowing that they were in the same position at the moment, and the small internal conflict must not affect the overall situation. In other words, for Unohana Retsu, Shiwen Yorishi and Nell, the center of the conflict between them was undoubtedly the ranking issue under Senju Makoto, but what was even more intolerable was the factor that affected Senju Makoto's safety. Therefore, after Senju Makoto expressed his position, Unohana Retsu, Shiwen Yorishi and Nell all stopped completely, waiting for Senju Makoto's next statement. Senju Makoto saw this, secretly rejoicing madly, but he didn't show any sign of it on the surface, and spoke with a serious expression. Yoichi, Nell, you stay in the courtyard and be ready to provide support at any time, and you also need to be on guard against Aizen Sussup preparing to attack the courtyard. Unohana-sensei and I went to confirm the purpose of the incoming Arensei Grimjow. Immediately, Senju Makoto and Unohana Retsu quickly took action and rushed straight to Grimjow in the air above Karakura town. Shiwen Yorishi quickly took out the spare criminal war outfit in the courtyard and put it on, ready for battle. As for Nell, in order to avoid the leakage of her vast old-level Arensei's spiritual pressure and cause trouble to Senju Makoto, she chose to cancel the return to the blade state and return to the appearance of a lily first. Otherwise, once Nell's Arensei's spiritual pressure far exceeding Grimjow's was leaked, I'm afraid the Shinigami of Karakura town would have to suspect that the courtyard had been captured by the Arensei. Of course, after the release of the return to the blade, Nell's way of thinking inevitably returned to its innocent state, but Nell could remember everything that happened after the return to the blade. Therefore, even in the form of Lily, Nell completely understood that she could regain her powerful strength through the return to the blade, and her mission during the time when her father left the courtyard was to protect the courtyard and wait for her father to return. And at this moment, in the sky above Karakura town, Grimjow's arrogant style seemed to destroy Karakura town. The captains had not yet taken action, but they had already led out Kurosaki Ichigo, who had been training with the Masked Corps during this period. Crescent Moon, Sky Strike. The black crescent moon slashed at Grimjow from bottom to top. Boom. The huge explosion covered Grimjow in it, and Kurosaki Ichigo, who had directly released his Bankai and rushed to the battlefield, appeared in front of Grimjow, pointing his zanpakutō directly at Grimjow, and said, "Go back to Hukomundo. Karakura town is not a place where you can run wild." Ha 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 ha. In response to Ichigo Kurosaki, Grimjow laughed arrogantly. What a naive and funny statement, kid. As the smoke from the explosion dissipated, Grimjow, who had kept one hand in front of him to block the crescent moon sky strike, slowly lowered his palm that was blocking half of his face and spoke. "You, if I remember correctly, seem to be the Shinigami agent who made Ulkira suffer a little in the Seireitei." When he said this, Grimjow's face clearly revealed some excitement and fighting spirit, and then he suppressed it a little and said in a commanding tone, "My purpose here is very simple, hand over Nell Duodex Fang to me." The long string of names made Ichigo Kurosaki's mind confused. "Don't say that I don't know anything about that Nelly. Even if I know, I will never hand it over to a guy like you." Ichigo Kurosaki refused. This sentence undoubtedly instantly angered Grimjow, who was barely suppressing his nature. "It's really infuriating. You dare to say you don't know? Xiaolong has already confirmed the whereabouts of that woman, and then she disappeared completely. Although I hate that woman, that was the daughter of Ashura-sama. If I lose that woman, I will be very distressed. Grimjow squeezed out a few words from his teeth, and his eyes gradually revealed cruelty when he looked at Kurosaki Ichigo. Sure enough, it's better to beat you half to death, and then trade with those guys in Soul Society to get that woman back, right? For a moment, even though Kurosaki Ichigo was a little slow in some aspects, he could hear the hostility revealed in Grimjow's tone. The next moment, Kurosaki Ichigo's pupils shrank, and he felt the other party's spiritual pressure appear behind him the moment Grimjow disappeared in front of him. So fast. Kurosaki Ichigo turned around instantly, and Tensa Zanjutsu blocked Grimjow's zanpakutō in time. This, instead, made Grimjow's eyes more surprised and his fighting spirit gradually rose. He blocked it. But this is not bad. Before taking that woman back, let's do a little warm-up exercise. However, although Grimjow's words were full of arrogance and contempt, Grimjow was very clear that there were a lot of strong people hidden in Karakura town. The Masked Legion not long ago was a part of them. Therefore, Grimjow was ready to go all out from the beginning, and then hold a bargaining chip that could be exchanged for Nell. Kill him, Leopard King. Recommend this seedling. If you're interested, you can take it yourself. We're traveled through time and space, and forcibly bound to the manager system, forcing himself to capture and manage the invaders, or they were monsters with inhuman strength that traveled through time and space from various anima. Give a novice gift package, and give a Guardian of Sunshine for free. It turned out to be a girl with a snake in her lower body. Not only can she not help herself, but she also wants to kill herself and return to the demon world every day. Chapter 623. It's time to go home. Kill him, Leopard King. As Grimjow's word fell, an astonishing spiritual pressure burst out from Grimjow's body. Grimjow's appearance, which originally looked like a sturdy man, suddenly underwent a huge change. As his zanpakutō merged into his body, Grimjow seemed to have transformed into a humanoid white leopard. Not only did his hair extend to his lower back, but even the blue eyeshadow at the corners of his eyes spread to his temples. In addition to being covered with a layer of white tight armor, his limbs showed signs of animalization. For a moment, Grimjow seemed to have transformed into a fierce creature that was perfectly adapted to fighting and killing. Many captains and vice-captains who had secretly appeared nearby were also observing Grimjow's abilities and intelligence. Similar to what Makoto Senju had said when he first frightened Unohana and Shiryu in Yorishi, the other captains secretly stationed in Karakura town did not believe that Grimjow would be the only one to attack Karakura town. After all, the situation between Soul Society and Hukomundo became visibly tense. Both sides knew that the next battlefield was in Karakura town, and the early exposure of the Masked Corps, Urahara Kisuke, and Girates, undoubtedly made a considerable part of Karakura town's defensive force completely displayed in front of the Huko Palace. It is undoubtedly unreasonable for Grimjow to be alone, and facing the Taisen Sasuke. This unreasonableness is undoubtedly magnified in everyone's mind, and they subconsciously fear and guess Taisen Sasuke's goal. Even Senju Makoto, who appeared on a rooftop with Unohana to watch the battle, frowned slightly. If something major happened in the Huko Palace, then Zaraki Sawaya would definitely inform him in advance, but Zaraki Sawaya did not inform him in advance of Grimjow's appearance. In this way, there are only two possibilities. Either this is Grimjow's unauthorized action, or Aizen Sasuke concealed Zaraki Sawaya. The former is very likely. The latter is very dangerous. Of course, according to Senju Makoto's initial judgment, it seems that Grimjow is worried about Nell, so he is ready to fight to the death. After returning to the blade, Grimjow, who is very good at fighting and belligerent, has almost soared wildly at a visible level, and his originally terrifying speed has reached a terrifying level. Even though the ability of Bankai Tensor Zanjutsu has a huge bonus to his own movement speed, Ichigo Kurosaki can't keep up with Grimjow's speed. After just a few rounds, Ichigo Kurosaki was almost completely at a disadvantage. Spiritual pressure, speed, strength, fighting skills, almost every aspect, Grimjow is now firmly suppressing Ichigo Kurosaki. And because Grimjow's goal is to try to hijack Ichigo Kurosaki, so as to force the Shinigami to trade with him, he almost did his best in the battle with Ichigo Kurosaki. Boom. Grimjow's claws, like those of a wild beast, slapped suddenly. Even though Ichigo Kurosaki barely held Tensor Zanjutsu horizontally to resist, the huge impact still blasted Ichigo Kurosaki away. While Grimjow continued to chase Ichigo Kurosaki without stopping, his open claws burst out with blue light marks that seemed to materialize from the air. Claws of the Leopard King. The next moment, Grimjow crossed his claws and waved them at Ichigo Kurosaki, who was flying backwards. 10 blue light marks crossed and formed a light net that tore everything apart and enveloped Ichigo Kurosaki. Ichigo Kurosaki's eyes reflected the approaching light net, and his expression tightened. His hands, which were already trembling from being suppressed, tightly grasped Tensa's Ainjitsu with all his strength. Moon. Fang. Tenchong. This time, with the imminent death crisis, the hollowification that Ichigo Kurosaki had not yet fully mastered appeared instantly, and a hollow mask covered Ichigo Kurosaki's face, causing Ichigo Kurosaki's spiritual pressure to increase several times almost instantly. The size of the black crescent released by Ichigo Kurosaki also suddenly increased, and even faintly showed a continuous stream of water, directly blasting a big hole in the approaching Leopard King's claws. This scene also made some of the captains who were watching the battle secretly around pause their palms on the hills. For that current GOTY 13, Makoto Kurosaki is the most important cooperation target, and naturally they cannot watch their nephew Ichigo Kurosaki being hijacked by the enemy camp. What the captains didn't expect was that Ichigo Kurosaki actually had such a trick up his sleeve. As for Grimjow, he had never expected that the Leopard King's claw would be torn open, so Grimjow, who was originally planning to use the Leopard King's claw to seriously injure Ichigo Kurosaki and then quickly kidnap Ichigo Kurosaki, had no time to dodge the oncoming Getsuga Sky Strike. Boom. The remaining power of Getsuga Sky Strike hit Grimjow's chest with a bang, instantly sending Grimjow flying. When Grimjow stopped in midair, his face was already quite ugly, and there was a blood mark on his chest that was constantly using blood. As a person who had abandoned all unnecessary abilities that did not directly enhance combat, Grimjow did not have the ability of high-speed regeneration, which made this not-so-serious injury a bit troublesome. However, before Grimjow could confirm what was going on with Ichigo Kurosaki's sudden increase in combat power, Ichigo Kurosaki, who was still in his hollowed state, had already appeared behind Grimjow. Boom. The two sides collided again. However, the situation of being suppressed unilaterally before became evenly matched this time, and Grimjow's face became even uglier. If it were normal, Grimjow would only be happy to find an evenly matched opponent, and he would not care even if he died in the battle. But, that damn stupid woman. Grimjow's mind unconsciously appeared Nell's innocent smile, and his state was obviously becoming more and more irritable, and the attacks he launched against Ichigo Kurosaki became more and more crazy. And just as Grimjow and Ichigo Kurosaki entered a battle of equal strength, attracting most of everyone's attention. In the courtyard behind that flower exhibition hall, the extremely complex demon barrier was broken into a big hole in a way similar to anti-demon killing without anyone noticing. Invisible ripples appeared in the air. Nyla was sitting on a big rock, watching the battles that appeared from time to time in that distance with round eyes, but she didn't notice that there was a figure behind her, the figure named Aizome Sosok. Nylu, it's time to go home. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 624. Unimaginable Gap. When the voice sounded, Nell's eyes widened. She slowly turned her head and looked behind her. Aizen Sosok, who was wearing the clothes of the Huko Palace, suddenly appeared in Nell's eyes. Ai, Lord Aizen. Nell swallowed her saliva, and her expression showed a bit of fear. After Senju Makoto completed Nell's treatment with the two-stage blade return method, and Nell had her first blade return, Nell was now in a lily body and lily thinking, but she had remembered a lot of the past. Including the long and empty past in Huko Mundo, and the near death of Aizen Sosok's mask being cut by a frontal knife. If it weren't for her father's treatment and protection, Nell believed that even if she didn't die, she might have become a relatively special vast old experiment in the hands of Aizen Sosok. And seeing Nell's reaction, Aizen Sosok did not intend to execute Nell directly, a defector, but instead showed unexpected patience for Nell, and said calmly, "I've been out for so long, it's time to go back, Nell. Why would Aizen come to see me in person?" Even in her lily form, Nell was confused at this moment, and then subconsciously took a step back, holding his zanpakutō tightly with both hands, ready to return to the blade at any time, and shook her head and said, "No. Nell wants to stay in Karakura town. Nell doesn't want to go back to Kainyaku. Nell knew in her heart that Kurosaki Makoto was Ashwara Katamari, and she also knew the conflict between Aizen Sasuke and Ashwara Katamari, so she subconsciously concealed her name for Senju Makoto. Moreover, the resolute resistance on Nell's face showed that she was ready to resist Aizen Sasuke. This is not a request, but an order, Nell. Aizen Sasuke continued to speak. And Nailu is not important at all, and she can't fight. Nailu doesn't want the title of Espada anymore, Nailu stuttered, trying to lower her own value. Oh, in other words, Nailu's performance in the past few decades in the Palace of the Night is indeed like this. Mascot and Troublemaker are synonymous with Nailu. It's just that with the protection of Haribel and Grimjow, the lower-ranked Espada and Seireitei dare not provoke Nailu. As for the other Espada with higher rankings, they are afraid of the existence of Ashwara and Cheng and will not bother with Nailu. Even though Nailu once briefly recovered the combat power of the Seireitei at the level of Vastod in a state of anger and crisis, and was therefore given the title of the No. 5 Espada, but almost no one in the Palace of the Night will really include Nailu in the category of valuable combat power. Nailu, it's your freedom to not want the so-called Espada title, Aizen Sasuke said with a faint smile. But do you think that a mere Espada is worth my personal appearance? Nell, I'm sorry for underestimating your value in the past, but after realizing that you were a family member, I had to bring you back to the Palace of the Night to protect you. Lord Aizen, what are you talking about? We are not a family at all. Nell's family is only father, Nell retorted. That's right, Nell. Aizen Sasuke seemed to smile a little more, and even the look he gave Nell was much softer than when he looked at the other 10 Espadas. Whether you know it or not, whether you admit it or not, it doesn't matter, but that is the fact. Come back with me, Nell. No, I don't want to. However, these few simple words naturally could not shake Nell's determination. Her hands holding his zanpakutō tightened, and she was about to return to the blade. Aizen Sasuke's eyes slightly dropped, taking in Nell's slight changes in expression and movements, and spoke. Nell, it's meaningless to return to the blade. To me, you were a child with unique value, but resistance will not bring any other future except for increasing punishment, and it may even lead to the destruction of this courtyard in the aftermath of the battle. You don't want that, do you? Instantly, this sentence mostly destroyed Nell's determination. As a vast old-level Seireitei who was once killed by Aizen Sasuke's frontal sword, Nell knew that even if the scene was repeated, there would be no other results. If it was against other people, even if it was no one Stark, Nell would not think that she would lose. But the opponent was Aizen Sasuke, and Nell could not see the possibility of winning against him. Go back. When Nell's eyes thought of this result, they became wet unconsciously. Before that, the color of Utomunda was dim and lightless. But after meeting her father, feeling the unprecedented care, doubting and pity, Nell knew that there was an irreplaceable light in her world. Just when Nell was in a dilemma and couldn't make a decision with her naive thinking, who am I talking about? Isn't this Aizen Sasuke? After not seeing him for a while, he has actually fallen to the point of sneaking into other people's homes and kidnapping children. Almost as soon as the voice fell, Shifu Yorishi appeared behind Aizen Sasuke. Instant. White lightning flashed, and a violent whip kicked Aizen Sasuke's waist with lightning speed. And Shifu Yorishi's powerful spiritual pressure also broke out without any cover, echoing throughout the entire Karakura town, in this way to warn the strongmen of the entire Karakura town. To be more precise, it was to warn Senju Makoto. Nell, who just witnessed this scene, shouted out instinctively. No, the next moment, Aizen Sasuke, who was hit by Shifu Yorishi's whip kick, turned into a faint after-image. Shifu Yorishi's pupils shrank, but the whole person did not have time to make other reactions. Puff. A line of blood burst out from Shifu Yorishi's body. Damn it. At this moment, Shifu Yorishi's heart was shrouded in a faint despair. Originally, after facing the Mirror Flower Water Moon imitated by Tsuneshiro Tokinada through the Yamamoto Jindan last time, Shifu Yorishi secretly carried out a lot of targeted special training based on the combat experience. Originally, Shifu Yorishi thought that he could vaguely sense the flaws of Mirror Flower Water Moon at the time. After the targeted special training, it would be much easier to face Mirror Flower Water Moon again. Even if he couldn't see through the many illusions instantly, he could at least hold on for a while. I didn't expect. The difference between using the same Mirror Flower Water Moon is so big. Chapter 625 I will definitely pick you up in Hukomundo. Bang. Yorishi Shipping's body fell to the ground, and large pools of blood oozing out of her body were visible to the naked eye. In Nell's wide eyes, this scene happened so nakedly in front of her. Yorishi Shipping's whip kick hit the air, completely ignoring Aizen Sasuke, who was right beside her. Aizen Sasuke drew his sword slowly and cut down. Yorishi Shipping seemed to send herself to Aizen Sasuke's sword little by little. During the whole process, Yorishi Shipping's sharp intuition and instinct did not detect any abnormality. The sword even cut off Yorishi Shipping's spine with incomparable precision, completely cutting off the possibility of Yorishi Shipping's resistance. Then, Aizen Sasuke once again slowly raised the Kagami water moon in his hand in front of Nell, and the tip of the knife pointed directly at Yorishi Shipping's head. No, no. Seeing this, Nell hurriedly stepped forward and blocked Shipping Yuan Yorishi behind her, and said nervously and fearfully, "Lord Aizen, don't kill her, I'll go back with you." "Well, what's the reason, Nell?" "Shipping Yuan Yorishi and you are in a hostile position," Aizen Sasuke asked calmly. Nell bit her lip, her eyes unconsciously filled with tears, and said weakly, "If she dies, someone will be sad." It's too kind to answer as a hollow, but since it's Nell's request, whether the stray cat on the roadside is trampled to death is insignificant. Then, Aizen Sasuke put the Kikasui back into the scabbard, took Nell's hand with one hand, and said, "Then let's go back." As Aizen Sasuke's voice fell, a black cavity seemed to open with Aizen Sasuke as the coordinate, and Aizen Sasuke slowly pulled Nell into it. Nell looked back almost every few steps during the whole process, looking reluctantly at the new home she had just lived in, and looking at Yorishi Shipping Yuan lying in a pool of blood. In addition to sadness, her heart was full of gratitude. "Maybe I will never be able to return here, but I am so grateful to be taken care of by my father, Unohana, Yorishi, and Kotetsu during this time." And just before the black cavity closed, a spirit knife suddenly inserted through the gap in the black cavity that had not yet closed. This scene made Nell's tearful pupils tremble, and Aizen Sasuke, who had already turned around, also paused and turned his head to look at the black cavity behind him. The next moment, along the slight gap created by the spirit knife, a palm followed and inserted. Rip. In the incredible eyes of Ulquiorra, who was following Aizen Sasuke on the other side, the black cavity that was about to close was torn open. Senju Cheng's gloomy face and upper body appeared in the eyes of Aizen Sasuke, Ulquiorra, and Nell in this way. How is it possible? Ulquiorra couldn't help but ask. The opening and closing of the black cavity is a unique skill of the hollow. How could a mere quincy forcibly tear open the black cavity that is about to close? Perhaps, it was done naturally under extreme anger. Aizen Sasuke seemed to be teasing, and his expression was still relaxed and playful as he looked at Senju Cheng with a gloomy face. Senju Cheng forcibly opened the black cavity and spoke with a sharp and stern look. "Aizen Sasuke, where are you going to take Nell?" "Of course, I'm going to take her home, not leave her in the hands of a mere quincy who is the mortal enemy of the hollow," Aizen Sasuke replied. Senju Cheng narrowed his eyes and spoke. "It's a pity for you. Trying to take a hollow away from the hands of a quincy is intolerable." However, just as Senju Cheng was about to take Nell back by force, Aizen Sasuke curved his lips and said, "Are you sure?" "Shibuya Yorishi's life has already begun to count down. Unohana has never been omnipotent. I deliberately left behind injuries that even Unohana could not treat." Upon hearing this, Senju Cheng turned his head and looked at Unohana, who was already trying to stabilize Shibuya Yorishi's injuries. Unohana expression was extremely solemn in Senju Cheng's eyes, and then he carefully turned over Shibuya Yorishi's back and showed it to Senju Cheng. The entire spine was completely gone, and the internal organs were also damaged in many places. Even if Unohana medical skills were amazing, it was impossible to create a new spine out of nothing in a short period of time due to the limitations of the scope of Kido. And Aizen Sasuke seemed to have expected it. In addition to the problem with the spine, many internal organs of Shipping Yuan Yorishi were damaged. Even stopping the bleeding, Unohana alone was not able to stop the bleeding of multiple serious internal injuries at the same time. There is no doubt that Shipping Yuan Yorishi's situation was so critical that he could not think anymore. "Aizen Sasuke, remember this, Nell, I will definitely go to Hukomundo to pick you up. You wait for me in Hukomundo," Senju Cheng said in a hurried tone, and then he had to loosen his palm that was forcibly maintaining the black cavity, and then quickly pulled away and went towards Shipping Yuan Yorishi. The next moment, the black cavity was completely closed in front of Nell, making the environment completely dark, as if it had returned to the unique darkness of Hukomundo. Aizen Sasuke asked while leading Nell to the direction of Hukomundo. Nell, are you disappointed? Nell lowered her head slightly, shook her head, and said with a cheerful expression on her face. It's great to be able to say goodbye in the end. Oh? Nell doesn't want Kurosaki Makatao to really come to the Palace of the Night to pick you up. Aiden Sosok asked back. No, Nell said with a slightly nervous tone. Nell is just a troublesome troublemaker, and she has only known Mr. Kurosaki Makatao for a few days. Mr. Kurosaki Makatao will not take such a risky thing for Nell. It should be just a talk. Aiden Sosok did not comment on this, but just looked at Nell with a little deep meaning in his eyes. Soon, in front of the throne of the Palace of the Night, Aiden Sosok legged Nell out and sat on the throne. Dulkira followed closely behind and walked to the line of the 10 espadas below, except Grim Zhao. However, Aiden Sosok, who was sitting on the throne and looking down at the 10 espadas below, did not rush to speak. Instead, he supported his chin, as if silently waiting for something. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.